All right, I think we're all here. So I am going to call the meeting to order. And Dr. Joyner, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, and I actually have a flag on my chest, so. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hopefully.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. We'll go to public participation. Dr. Joyner and Dr. White.
Let me get my timekeeper. Should be on my desk at all times. Oh, here it is. Okay, you have 3 minutes to speak. You may complete your last sentence after I say time, which means that your 3 minutes has expired.
Before we begin, President Rivera, could you announce that we have interpretation tonight?
Of course. Buenas tardes. Esta reunión está disponible en 2 idiomas, español siendo uno de ellos. Si desean escuchar la reunión en español, presionen el enlace en la parte baja de la pantalla que dice Interpretation, interpretación. Gracias.
Thank you. And our first speaker tonight is Leslie Blateau. Ms. Blateau, you may begin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Blateau. I'm the president of the New Haven Federation of Teachers and a Hill Central parent. I'd like to focus our attention tonight on the biggest issue facing us right now, the teacher shortage crisis. And I want to offer some concrete next steps for how we can respond. As of this afternoon, there are 291 certified teacher vacancies in New Haven. And while this is not a problem unique to us, the New Haven Federation of Teachers believes this must be addressed. Each of our students deserves a certified teacher in the classroom.
Was she muted?
It looks like it.
Can't hear her.
Let me
We
stop the
must not only
time. Let me
recruit new
stop the
teachers, we
time.
must do more to retain the teachers who already work here. We must, you can't hear me? Hello?
Well, we missed you for a time, so I gave you a little bit more time.
Okay, let me pick back up again. I apologize and appreciate the flexibility. Did you hear 291 vacancies?
Yep.
Here we go. Each of our students deserves a certified teacher in the classroom. We must not only recruit new teachers, we must do more to retain the teachers who already work here. We must address working conditions because our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. Teachers want to be able to do the job we've been hired to do with the supplies and resources necessary to do it well. We want to have a seat at the table when decisions are being made that impact our students and schools, and we want to be treated with empathy and respect. When we look at the resignation and transfer data, it's clear that some schools have more vacancies than others. These schools must return to the guiding principles of Comer School Development Program, no-fault problem solving, consensus, and relationship building, without which our staff and our families will continue to feel alienated and demoralized while further compounding the teacher shortage crisis. And of course, we must do something about salaries. Compared to neighboring towns, New Haven is no longer competitive enough to hold on to our teachers. Our students deserve certified teachers in each classroom. There are no shortcuts here. What is our district and this board doing to demand more equitable funding from Connecticut and Yale? NHFT is ready to join you in the fight. We must also invest our resources in a way that ensures our students' needs are met. The debates about how to address this abound, so let's return to the research. Research to improve literacy and numeracy rates, to prioritize play and outdoor ed, to cultivate joy and lifelong learning, and to ensure class sizes are low enough for our students to get the attention they deserve. To improve literacy rates, we must have a full-time library media specialist in every school. To improve outcomes, our multilingual students and students with special ed needs must have consistent and certified professionals working with them at ratios that prioritize their needs. However, this is a community effort. We care deeply about our students and we're ready to partner with parents, families, and the community to push for the schools our students deserve. NHFT wants to hear from you, so reach out so we can take these next steps together. We will have a tent at the NHPS Back to School rally at Bowen Field on Thursday, August 18th at 3 p.m., where we will be distributing thousands of free books to our students and families. We look forward to seeing you there, and feel free to visit our Facebook or Twitter or email me Blateau at nhft933.org for more information. Thank you. We look forward to working with you on this together.
Our next speaker is Jenny Graves. Jenny Graves.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Graves. I'm a teacher at the Dr. Mayo School, and I am VP of Special Services for the New Haven Federation of Teachers. As we are all enjoying these last few weeks of sweet summer, I know we are also getting excited to return to our classrooms and to our students. I wanted to personally thank the district for providing a remote option for the convocation on August 24th. With New Haven's elevated COVID-19 community transmission, we appreciate your commitment in keeping our staff safe so we are healthy and ready to welcome our students back on their first day. Our families and students also appreciate the added sense of security of the remote option as their health and safety is being protected as well. Thank you for your partnership, your flexibility, and your understanding. We hope to see you in our buildings welcoming our students back with us. Enjoy the rest of these sweet summer days, and we will see you soon. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Sarah Levine.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Levine, and I'm a reading teacher at Barnard School. I want to start by thanking the board for how seriously you reacted to the reading and math scores presented last week. With your support and guidance, New Haven can and will do better for its students. I think a shift in the discussion would benefit the process of teaching our students to read. Instead of having the conversation be about balanced literacy versus structured literacy, let's follow the advice of Margaret Goldberg from the Right to Read Project and see the good in balanced literacy and move on. To quote Goldberg, instead of seeing balanced literacy as our primary method of teaching reading, we can view it as a collection of tools, some were effective, others weren't, which we've acquired over the years, end quote. We can all recognize the importance of the interactive read aloud, for example, in building vocabulary, background knowledge, and story structure, in addition to giving students a chance to improve their oral language skills, among other things. We should certainly continue using this tool for teaching literacy. However, we should also recognize that giving young students books to practice reading with words they cannot decode will teach students to look away from the letters to figure out the words, a practice of poor readers. Let's determine that this tool is not effective. Instead, let's give students the training wheels of books, decodable texts, until they no longer need them. Hopefully, by the middle to end of second grade, some students sooner and others later. This does not mean that students should not be given time to look through books of choice for enjoyment. They should be given this time, but we cannot mistake this for explicit reading instruction, which most students require to learn to read. Thank you, and I hope that moving forward, we can continue to discuss various literacy practices to determine which benefit our students and which do not.
Our next speaker is Shafiq Abu Dessar. I do apologize if I've mispronounced it. You may speak.
Yes, good evening, board. My name is Shafiq Abdusabar. I am the founder and owner of Echo Urban Pioneers. This is EUP's public testimony today. Dear Board of Ed, Echo Urban Pioneers would like to thank you for working with this partnership that we've had with you over the last 7 years. Our entities have worked well over those years, and we are extremely proud to have employed hundreds of New Haven residents, primarily from underserved communities, and to have provided clean schools with 0 shutdowns due to cleaning over the tumultuous years, including the pandemic. It is our position that our bid as EUP for the year of 2022 and 23 was the lowest bid. Yes, we were able to arrive at the low bid by working with our team and having a thorough understanding of the Board of Ed schools. Our bid called for 8 less staffers and resulted in being the lowest one-year bid. Please note that this is a one-year contract that you are considering to approve tonight, not a 5-year contract. Our outlying years are not supposed to exceed our proposed bid numbers. However, the Board of Ed, it is our opinion that the Board of Ed should negotiate this contract and bid this contract out more than once within a 5-year period. And this is why. We are currently in a year of unprecedented inflation. And so to have our firm bid 5 years at this current rate may not bring about the realistic financial outcomes that the Board of Ed is looking for. EUP realizes that a much larger out-of-state firm may have a lower per hour rate or per year rate than our firm does. But please keep in mind that EUP is a small local firm, and we have been able to make changes quickly to meet the needs of the Board of Ed and respond to the difficult times that the board has faced over the last 5 years. For example, when Mr. Pinto, the former CFO, approached us about taking a $500,000 reduction during COVID, even though we kept our 32 BJ EUP workers in the field, we complied and we returned back to the Board of Ed a savings of $500,000. Then in 2020, Mr. Pinto, then the former CFO, COO, negotiated us for the renewal to give back 1.5% of what we had initially bid. And again, we agreed. And then in 2021, when the current COO, Mr. Lamb, asked the Board of Ed to increase our workers to 25 workers, to have this COVID staff in the schools, to be able to open up the schools where the teachers felt comfortable, we immediately hired what had to be 50 staff, trained them, and put them in the field. 25 workers in the field, 25 workers as backup. We did this for 10 months while the paperwork went through the whole network and went to the attorney's office. But for 10 months, we carried all of those workers without being paid. We did not stop the extra hours because we were not being paid, because our relationship with the Board of Ed, the students and our staff, and the New Haven community as a valued partner in providing safe, clean schools for the city of New Haven, that's what our commitment was. For nearly 7 months, we carried a payroll of 210 workers with union fees for $1.2 million, 7 months. This $1.2 million also included the lapse payment of the regular contract because we were waiting on a new purchase order. We eventually got paid the $400,000 that we needed for the COVID worker in an expense that we carried out for 10 months. The question that we have is, will the new vendor be able to do this type of accommodation for the Board of Ed? And we would just say that bigger is not always better, and you get what you pay for. We believe that we can execute this contract for the dollars that we put out and maintain our service. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kirsten. Please state your full name and when you begin.
Hello, good evening, everyone. This is Kirsten Hopes Mcfadden. I am a teacher at ESUMS, a parent of 2 graduates of ESUMS, an alum of Hill House High School, and I'm also the vice president of middle schools for NHFT. I spoke last Thursday at the special meeting, and I was a little disappointed that I was kicked out of the meeting after I spoke and was not allowed to get back in. So I believe there was some technical issues, but I hope that has been resolved now that we have Dr. White back. Good to see you, Dr. White. I am here because I am concerned about what's going on with education in New Haven. I am, as I said, I'm an alum of New Haven. I chose to come back to teach in New Haven, and it's like we're trying to reinvent the wheel. When I was in school, I learned how to read. I learned how to write. I learned how to do math. I learned all that stuff. My teachers were wonderful. They prepared me well. As I said on Thursday, they prepared me well to go to the University of Pennsylvania. And from there, I went on to Howard Law School, passed the bar the first time. So I know that New Haven is capable because I am an example of it. My children are an example of it. My siblings, my family is an example of how well New Haven can educate its students to do well in this world. And I don't want bickering or fighting about whatever the strategies are to get students to that point, to keep the students of this generation from getting there. And I just want us to do that. The other issue that I have is about teacher retention. Every week, every 2 weeks, we're seeing all these teachers is leaving us. We're bleeding teachers. It's like we're hemorrhaging. You know, we need triage. We need to come up with a plan where we can retain teachers and not just think that more teachers are coming in, because they're not coming like they used to, because everyone is hemorrhaging teachers. So we need to retain the teachers that we have, invest in the teachers that we have, and make sure that, they're capable, they're more than capable of doing their job, but make sure that they're capable of, staying here and maintaining the living that they can, so they can give to our students what they need. We're here. We want to teach our students. We want the best for them. Unfortunately, we also have families, and some of us cannot afford to stay here when, you can go to another district and make $10,000 or $20,000 more. Let's just face it. People have to make financial decisions for their family. So let's just do what we can to keep our teachers here, educate our students, give them that world-class education that I received, because it was truly a world-class education. And I want that for my students. I'm prepared to give it to them. And I want my colleagues to stay here and give that to them. We should not be opening with classroom. We should not be opening with vacancies. We need teachers in front of our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tony Criscolo. Ms. Criscolo, you may begin speaking.
Hello, everyone. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say this evening, because I really wasn't. It was such a difficult year last year that I didn't know what to say on so many levels. So as I was listening to other people speak, I think that I would say this. I felt like teachers were being called mercenary, that you think that we would leave only for money, because I know many teachers who stay even though they could go elsewhere and make more money. It's not all about money. Money is important. I taught in Catholic school for many years. I'm used to not making money. This is the most money I ever made in my life, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the treatment of the teachers. We had a field day. I teach at East, I'm sorry. We had a field day at the end of the year. It was very loosely organized and it was very well done. The kids were so happy just to be with each other out on the field, hanging around, talking, a little sports, a little talking. It was a nothing thing that cost almost nothing. And it made the students so happy. You can do the same thing for teachers. And it isn't just give us more money, although you could always do that. That would be fine. However, respecting our time, responding to issues that we have, supporting the teachers in the classroom. To me, and I only speak for myself, and maybe some of my colleagues wouldn't be that happy to hear this. To me, the support and the encouragement and even the praise that I would get for things that I have done and tried to do is like money to me. Most of us teachers take a great deal of pride in what we do. We think we are doing something important, And we want to be treated like we are doing something important, just like we want to treat our students like they are doing important work as well. But it's not something that you can quantify. I would think about that when you're planning things for us, convocations, meetings, CIAs, TVAL. If we don't have to do it, let us go a little bit. We have plenty to do without another meeting to go to unless it is necessary. Just the way that you would want to be treated and the way that we hope to treat our students with no busy work, no foolish work. Teachers also don't want busy work and foolish work. We're very busy. We try very hard. I'm looking forward to this year. I am a little nervous about it because last year was not a lot of fun, but hopefully this year will be more fun. And with your support and encouragement, I hope that this will be a very, very good year. And thank you all for everything that you do and for your support and service.
Madam President, that concludes the hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Joyner and Dr. White. So we'll move on to the action items. I did notice that the approval of the meeting minutes is not on the agenda. Dr. Tracy, if we could make sure we get them on the agenda for our next meeting. We had two board meetings, a regular meeting and a special meeting that we're going to need to approve minutes on.
Sorry, Madam President, point of order. I see approval of board
Mr.
meeting
Wilson.
minutes on my agenda.
Yes, it's on the agenda.
It's the first item under action items.
Yeah,
Not on mine.
July 25th.
That's weird. Okay.
Weird.
Do you all have it on your, because if it's on, then
Yeah,
you can
I
just
got
move
it.
forward. Okay,
I have
because I do have the minutes. I just didn't see it on my agenda.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
it is a posted version of the meeting.
Okay, perfect. So then we're just missing the special meeting one, which is fine because we can do that at our next meeting. Okay, so is there a motion to approve?
There's some background, excuse me, guys. Hey, Shirley. Shirley, you gotta move away.
Madam President, I'll move approval of the July 25th board minutes.
I wasn't quick enough on the mute button. Sorry. Is there a second? Mr. Wilcox?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I know you're happy.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll vote to approve the meeting minutes of July 25th. Mr. Golton,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Ms. Roman,
Yes.
Mr. Bustamante,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. And so those minutes pass. And I don't know what's happening with me. I must be blind. I do see the line with the approval of the board minutes. It's on the agenda. I don't know where I was looking. But that's
Well,
done.
it's summer and it's hot.
Okay, we'll move on to the personnel report. Dr. Tracy?
Good evening, board. Thank you, Madam President. I present to you tonight's personnel report. On the action items, we have coordinator of recruitment and retention to work with HR. I recall the last time we talked about supporting HR more in what they have to do. So this is an administrator who will be supporting HR and to get what we're doing. I should say to help HR with what they have to do. So this is rather than the original position we had where it was just a recruiter. We are changing that. We've changed that. We've worked with the SAA union to work this out because this is an administrator, one who has been a principal. And I think she is on somewhere after you vote on this. Her name is Sarah Diggs. Along with that, we have about 42 new hires that have come in. We have a lot more, but 42 made it onto this list. But those new hires have been told that they are being hired. It's just that at the time, we were not able to put all of them on this list, but this list has 42 new hires for the school system. And so we are plugging away. We are aware that we have a lot of resignations and retirement, but I will share with you the accuracy of the data around the number of vacancies we have. So I ask the board accept this personal report.
Mr. Wilcox,
I move we approve the action items on the superintendent's personnel report.
I second the motion.
thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Wilcox, any discussion?
I had a quick question.
Mayor Elicker?
Dr. Tracy, I understand the transfers aren't voted upon, but Ms. Velasquez's resignation is noted on the non-action report. And I was wondering if there's any, if you would want to share any sort of next steps with that position.
That will come after we vote on this. I usually do it after this action items are voted on.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion on the personnel report, the action items? Okay, seeing none, we will vote on the personnel report action items. Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Mr. Bolton,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Mr. Bustamante,
Yes.
Ms. Roman,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well, and personnel report passes. Dr. Tracy, the
Okay.
second part of the personnel report.
So I'll ask that Ms. Diggs be promoted, just to say a few words. You can see who she is if she's on. Ms. Diggs, unmute yourself, Ms. Diggs. Okay, hello, Ms. Diggs.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's so good to see all of you. I really appreciate you hearing from me this evening and for voting to put forward the personnel report. I had a couple of words prepared to say, but I'm going to go off the cuff a little bit. And listening to both Kirsten and Tony during public comment and hearing to them speak about teacher retention, it's just so evident that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. And I'm just really excited to be joining the team and supporting the HR department to ensure that all of our teachers really feel like New Haven is a place they can stay and grow and stay committed to our students. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really excited to get started and hopefully to meet all of you in person very soon. So thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, this leads us now to information on the item that's usually not discussed, but that's where we report resignations and retirements and FMLAs, etc. As I had shared with the board previously, that Ms. Eva Velasquez, our assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction, is moving on to, and it's already in the paper. So she's moving on to New Britain to be deputy superintendent of that system. Evie has done a lot of work for us and has done a lot of professional development with our staff, has spearheaded the equity work through DELT, at least getting that to implementation stage, among other things. And last year we looked at the frameworks in which literacy should happen. And of course, the 5 components of literacy were embedded in that framework. And she had planned for this year to have a lot more professional development for staff around these areas of literacy. So I just want to say congratulations to Ms. Evie Velasquez for her recent appointment in New Britain. Thank you, Evie, for servicing New Haven for the last 2 years. That would make 4 years you've been in New Haven. So thank you so much. We also have on here a long time. I have to mention her. Miss Mary Maloney has served New Haven for so many years. And Mary, I'm jealous that you're leaving me behind. We go way back, Mary, and also Paula Datesman. Paula Datesman go way, way back from the old East Rock School. I know Dr. Joyner and I think Abby, Dr. Benitez, will remember who Paula Datesman is. She was a longtime librarian at East Rock School when it was that crummy building that we had, that, right? And she stayed right through to the new building and etc. So, plus we have other retirements like Mr. James Newton, who has been around forever, Nancy, Carmen, and Mr. Boyd. We have some teachers who have resigned. Let me say this. New Haven is, for me, and has been a great place to work. New Haven Public Schools has done a lot for me personally, a place where I enjoy working for the past 38 years of my life here in New Haven. And I know teachers come and teachers go. That's something we cannot stop from happening. I know this time last year, we have 160 new teachers. I don't know how many people knew that, 160 new teachers. And at this time, the last report that I looked at in terms of classroom facing teachers showed about, Vivian, I was checking about 116 or 114 classroom facing. And when I say classroom facing, psychologists are considered in the category of teachers, counselors are considered in the category of teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So when we pull apart the data, we're looking at those who are actually having 20-something kids in front of them, and we consider those classroom-facing teachers. So we continue to reach out. We continue to try our best to fill the vacancies that are there. We know that if we do not have certified teachers in place, it's going to be a struggle for our students to learn, just like what happened last year when we had a number of people out, and we also had a number of vacancies and we had to fill with substitute teachers. We may have the same challenge this year. So someone mentioned the word crisis. There's crisis in everything. I have crisis in my life. There's crisis all over the place. If we were to start to enumerate the different crises, it would be a lot. So I want to say that New Haven Public Schools, we are working hard to make sure on day one, we have enough teachers in front of our students. For those vacancies, hard to fill vacancies, especially in math and science, we are working hard on that. I think Mr. McCain checked some other system. There's actually nothing in their Apple track system for science. So New Haven and other communities like New Haven are really suffering for the lack of teachers in especially these shortage areas. Last year, we filled all vacancies for math last year. And this year, we're looking at about 10 or so vacancies for math this year, and we are hoping to fill those. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Sorry, I laughed, but I'm laughing at Mr. Goldson's slide class.
I'm sorry, I have these wasps that are flying around and I'm trying to.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy.
The main reason I'm on the deck is that my water heater went out and flooded my office downstairs. So I have some guys down there doing some work now. So I've been at work. Unfortunately, I have to work on the deck these days.
Good luck. It's hot. Good luck. Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Any questions for Dr. Tracy? Mr. Bolton?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Tracy, you sent an email out to us today regarding the curriculum position. Do you plan on discussing that now or some other time? Or
I am sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. I had that written down to say. So knowing that Ms. Velasquez is leaving, I looked internally among my staff in terms of assistant superintendents. I have Ms. Keisha Hannons, who has her master's in curriculum instruction and also her degree in mathematics. I am transferring her into that position to take that on rather than to take someone else from the outside. I'm going internally right now. So Ms. Hannons has agreed to take on that position. What she had originally and working with staff internally to divide up this work for them. Thank you. But that's not something that should come back through the board per se, because on the contract, it said superintendent can reassign position.
That would be, two questions, real quick. One is, I assume that will be on the information only, sheet, personnel
Yes.
sheet once it's done.
Yes,
Well, actually, three questions. Secondly, I'm assuming that's a lateral move.
yes.
So there's no change in funding or so on. And my third question is, which contract are you referring to? Are you referring to Miss Keisha Hannon's contract, or are you
Yes.
referring to your contract?
Miss Keisha's contract.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on.
I have a
There are two people.
Oh. Mr. Bustamante, go ahead, and then Dr. Joyner.
Sorry about that. Good evening, board. Good
Your
evening.
virtual hands are kind of blending in with the background a little bit.
Yeah, we got brown hands and brown background. I'm gonna use Michael Jackson's white glove next time.
Go ahead.
Dr. Tracy, I'm wondering, what are the exact steps and strategies that you and your team are taking to recruit and retain teachers? Because, I mean, it is a very big problem. Obviously not one that only New Haven is facing, but it is a big problem that needs to be mitigated that a lot of teachers and students have brought up. So what are some steps that are being taken?
So I could tell you one. Thanks, Mr. Bustamante. I can tell you one right now. We have sent out where we're recruiting back retired teachers, because to be honest with you, this pickings is slim out there, as especially relates to an urban area recruiting. So we have sent out, Ms. Mack had sent out to the community to hire back those who want to come back after retirement. And so we've gotten some of those and more coming in. And by state law recently, they can work for 2 more years after their retirement. So that's what we're doing currently.
And are there any other steps you plan on taking in the future?
There can be steps, Mr. Bustamante, but the fact is that there's nothing out there. We have a system that sends things out to teachers in other places. And whether or not they're going to leave their towns to come here for less money, that's problematic. We're not in a position to compete. But all I want to say that I really thank those teachers who, no matter what, are remaining behind and they're staying here working on behalf of our students. People have the right to go wherever they need to go, but there's some of us who are really dedicated to New Haven Public Schools, and we had on here for years. So recruiting those teachers and using other electronic systems. We have advertised on different platforms to get teachers. I know before Ms. Mack and her team have had recruitment fair. I'm not sure how many people we gleaned from that, or just to understand that it's a challenging moment with everyone poaching. People are poaching New Haven. I heard Ms. Plateau very, very clear, and she's right. But if I get an offer of 10 and 20,000 someplace else with this inflation, I would jump at it too. So that's what's happening. So I know Darnell always talks about pushing. I know teacher contracts are coming up too. So pushing the state and to give more funding to New Haven in order to bring New Haven up to speed with other towns around so we can compete. Right now, we're not in a position where we can compete. And that's just a reality.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy, Mr. Bustamante. Dr. Joyner, and then Mr. Bolton.
I think if we're going to be realistic about this, the solution for this is beyond our capacity as a district. We have low salaries, and we also have challenging conditions in our school. When I was the director of the largest teacher prep program in the state, only 3 of the hundreds of students I had said they would work in urban education. And I think the three of them said that because they wanted to please the professor. But one came, Peter Greco, he's still here because he has a real great commitment to working in this environment. So unless we can get the governor and the legislature to give us the revenue that we deserve so that we can enhance teacher salaries, then we're going to be dealing with this question every year. Secondly, if the border towns pay even $5,000 more than we do, and by border towns, I mean East Haven, West Haven, Hamden, any town within 5 or 6 miles of the district, then a person can move there and increase their salary and stay in their same residence. And that's a problem throughout the country where border towns, particularly around urban areas, are able to get teachers. Now, some people would rather work here under any circumstance because they have a social and cultural commitment to work in urban education. But this is a structural problem that more revenues from the federal and state government could help, as well as forgiveness loans for people who go in education and that sort of thing and work in urban communities. So the policy to change this is beyond us, but we should be pressing for it. I was pleased to hear, we don't respond to public comment the first night. I think we should in subsequent times, but I was pleased to hear the attitude of the people that commented tonight because we're on the same team. And unless we can convince Lamont, Governor Lamont and the legislature to give urban districts additional revenues to attract and retrain teachers. The other thing is that our personnel department is less than half of that of Hartford's. Hartford has 17 people in human resources. I think we have about 7, and we haven't had that. So we're a little bit like Ukraine. We're going to probably win the war, but it's going to take its toll. And the last thing is I think Dr. Tracy has done a good job of moving people around when we have a sudden departure like we have now. And Keisha Red Hannans is a graduate of New Haven Public Schools, Jackie Robinson, the Hill House. She is a math teacher. She's taught in New Haven Public Schools. She knows the city, she knows the town, she knows the neighborhood, she knows the people. And this is a great move on your part, Dr. Tracy, to elevate her to that position, actually to move her to that position. And it looks like you're saving some money as well. So I commend you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Bolton, and then Mr. Bustamante.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree with Dr. Joyner on his points that we certainly could use more money, even though we've gotten a whole lot more money over the last 2 years. Is never enough, but that can't be the only solution. And I think there's other ways that we could look at recruiting and retaining folks. Perhaps we could partner with the Housing Authority and some other entities to provide housing to some teachers. I mean, I look at some of these starting salaries, and if I were a teacher starting at $45,000, $47,000, I certainly would appreciate having an apartment that was super affordable. That's one. I mean, I know we did it with the police at one time. We were putting up police officers in Housing Authority apartments. I know it was partially to provide more security, or hopefully more security at those housing authorities, but it's doable. The other thing is we have world-class universities here in the city. We do a good job of going to these universities and getting other benefits from them. Why can't we go to them and say, hey, can you provide some sort of incentives to our teachers who come to the school system to get a continuing education at these schools? Yeah, more money is good, but there are other ways to be creative around this. I don't know if you've already tried that stuff. I'm just saying, I haven't heard that you have. So if you haven't, it might be some things to consider. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Mr. Bustamante?
Yes, so I'm just very concerned. Like, I don't have any other language to hide it behind. I'm just very, very concerned. But also recognizing that this crisis, and it is a crisis, falls on the Board of Education, on us as well. And again, since I'm relatively new to the board, I want to know, because I think it's one thing to talk about the ideas, and I really like the ideas that Mr. Goldson brought up, but what are the next steps? Are we able to add this to an agenda for a meeting to discuss in detail? Do we refer it to a committee? Because we just simply can't stand around giving out ideas and talking about them and not taking action on it. I recall 2 meetings ago, we had a similar conversation and we also had great ideas, but nothing's happening. So are we able to put this as an agenda, a topic of discussion on the agenda for the next meeting or the next couple of meetings? Because it also falls on us. So we need to do something as a board.
Miss
Go ahead, Dr. Tracy.
Beck, could you tell some of the, I know Mr. Golson referred to a couple of strategies that have been used and still being used. Could you speak, Ms. Lisa Mack?
Yes, so good afternoon, board. Good afternoon, all. So we are currently, we just, as you all know, because this evening you approved our coordinator recruitment and retention, and we're looking forward to her joining our team. And also, so some of the strategies that we have done thus far, we currently have a partnership with Southern Connecticut State University, and Mr. Golson did speak to the local universities, and we currently have 53 students enrolled, and that's considered our grow your own strategies. And so our hope and goal is that they all will successfully complete the program. Some of the 53 are hired as full-time teachers, which is an incentive to utilize the internal staff that we have as a recruitment effort. And they're, a combination of all different ethnicities and background. And so at the end of the 2-year program, if they successfully complete their program, we will have them as full-time teachers as well. In addition to that, we do look at the other local colleges and universities. We have a partnership with Relay of Connecticut. We have some students in Relay as well. And we, as I may have mentioned this before, we currently have 2 grants from Frosting, and we currently have a $50,000 grant. And what we do to try to help support the teachers in the Southern Connecticut program as well as Relay, we're looking to offer them some support with book support, buying their books, and also any other support of how we can support them. We have a partnership with Elm City Communities where we do actually provide housing for 1 teacher. Right now, we don't have the availability to have more than 1 position, 1 housing unit available for that teacher, local teacher, and it's free housing. So it's a great partnership with Elm City Communities where if that teacher is selected, it is a process that they currently go through. And if that teacher is selected, that teacher does offer some of his or her time back to that community, and they have free housing while they're New Haven Public Schools teachers. Some of the other incentives that will include, and that is housing assistance, the homeowners program, which the state does provide support to all new teachers. And one of the big areas that we haven't talked about yet, but again, once our new recruiter comes on board, we are looking at developing a recruitment plan, a robust recruitment plan that does include travel. And it does include travel too. We're looking at the number of teachers vacancies that we do have. It is, unfortunately, it is not 291, it's much less than that. And we'll share that data when it's, whenever the superintendent wants to share that data. But as we are, I do need to all know that it's not a crisis just for New Haven, it's a crisis for not only Connecticut, it's a crisis across the country, because as I have mentioned before, that teachers they're leaving the field of education. New Haven teachers are great teachers, and many of our teachers are looking to stay here. And we have to work together to figure out what's the best way to retain them. As you've seen, that some of the efforts we have used are, Dr. Tracy did offer not just teachers, but all employees an incentive to stay this year, and another incentive, a monetary incentive for next year as well. So I think it's important that we continue to have this conversation and work together in order to find the best teachers for our communities. When Dr. Tracy did mention that if you look on the board, we have on board some of our post-retired teachers, and we're bringing them back, and we have others that we're bringing back. Specifically, someone mentioned math vacancies. We have a current couple of math candidates that are planning to have agreed to come back to work with us for the school year, and thanks to Governor Lamont, that's allowing us to hire teachers back at a full-time basis for the next 2 years because New Haven is a priority school district. So these are some of the many ideas that we're talking about. You know, we took a trip to Puerto Rico back in 2017, and in some of the candidates that we worked with way back then, Danny Diaz has been so helpful and thankful to work with us. And we just recently onboarded some of those candidates back. It was only 2 people, but that's a start. We have to start somewhere. And again, even though teachers are leaving, we are hiring at around the same pace, and we're trying to maintain to ensure that we have very little vacancies. We'll have probably substitute teachers filling those vacancies, but we want to hope to have them with full-time candidates. But it is challenging when we're trying to mitigate a budget deficit as well. So, you know, we're open to hear more suggestions, and we're moving right along. It's a fast-paced environment. This happens every year, but it is a little bit higher this year, and I think a lot has to do with just the environment that we live in now, the pandemic, inflation, and a lot of other districts are offering monetary and bonuses, incentives to onboard, and we're just not at that place yet to offer or compete with other collective bargaining agreements that have already been set in place. Our salaries are our salaries because they negotiated a contract, and we have to adhere to the salary schedule when we make offers. So this is where we are for right now, but we hope to again, to build our team back up, because people want to work in New Haven. It's just a matter of, in order to recruit, we have to have a team. And thank you for, again, proving that the coordinator recruitment, but we're still building, and we're still hoping that we're going to have the best teachers in New Haven with the best HR team and the best board to help support as we do this work.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Ms. Knapp. Mr. Bolton?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Tracy and Lisa, I appreciate that update. I was familiar with some of the stuff that you're doing now for getting folks certified and bring them on, but I was more interested about retention, bringing folks on and keeping them on. And you know, there are the Board of Aldermen are approving contracts all the time, or agreements all the time, to build housing. There's a big housing boom going on in New Haven, huge here in Westville. There's another apartment complex going up where 500 Blake used to be. There's another one that's being proposed to be built right on Whaley Avenue. There's all this housing that's going up, and the Board of Aldermen are doing these agreements with these builders to provide certain levels of those apartments for low-income people. I mean, I think we should have a conversation with the Board of Aldermen about reserving some of this housing for our teachers, you know, so that could help recruit teachers in here. So I understand what you guys are doing, but there's a whole lot more we could do if we sit people down at a table and kind of brainstorm this stuff and spitball this stuff. And I agree with Mr. Bustamante. You know, this should be a regular subject of discussion that we should be having at the board, not just bring up some ideals and then never hear about them again. I'm hoping, I guess this would be teaching and learning, so I would assume, I would hope that the chair of that committee, Dr. Joyner, would look at maybe not only having a regular item on his agenda, but maybe putting together a task force, you know, bringing people that you wouldn't expect to be at the table, who could actually put, I mean, Community Foundation, all of these other players here in the city that could, you know, help brainstorm this stuff. So I'm not saying that the answer is in those discussions, but at least it's the beginning of the answer in those discussions, you know. So there's a lot of people that want to participate and want to be heard and want to help the school system. Let's bring them to the table and spitball and find out what, I mean, you never know what's going to come out of those discussions. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Dr. Jordan?
I'm not going to throw any spitballs, but I think that one, I want this item on the next teaching and learning meeting. And I'd like to see it be a permanent part of the agenda. so that when Dr. Tracy gives a personnel report, because in the spirit of no fault, when you're trying to solve a problem, you have to do a thorough analysis of the current reality and the obstacles that you have to remove, and the ones that you can do yourself, you do them immediately. And the ones that require outside help, you have to bring in those outside people. There are a lot of people that are concerned about education in this city, and Mr. Golson and Mr. Bustamante are correct. We need to get them under our tent and see what we can do collectively to bring more teachers here. So again, it'll be on the next TL agenda. And hopefully, Madam President, we could have a special amount of time devoted to updates on that particular matter. But bear in mind what the president of the teachers union said and what some of the other people said in public comment. Money is an issue. You cannot, everything has a price tag, and we have to get more money in this system in order to retain people that we hire. And anybody that's been a principal knows that we've lost good people because they've gotten a better salary working in the next town or 2 towns away. And of course, you should also know one of the best kept secrets in College of Education is that sometimes people take the job that they can get and then keep looking for the jobs that they actually want. And there are a group of teachers that we hire every year who don't necessarily want to be here. And as soon as they get an opportunity to go back home or to other places where they wanted to go in the first place, they do that. You would only know that if you run a teacher prep program, because the students tell you that before they get out of grad school. And I would tell my students, don't go to New Haven if that's what you're going there for, because we don't need that. But it's very complicated and nuanced, and we'll deal with it. And and if people want transparency, we will give you complete transparency around that issue. And we would like to have it back too, because in a transparent environment, everybody needs to be transparent.
Thank you, Dr. Jordan. Dr. Yarborough?
Thank you. I support the comments being made. I'm also in favor of having a robust inquiry to our teachers, those who are here, and asking, what are your incentives to be here, to stay here? What are your incentives to leave? For those who turn down an opportunity in New Haven, why? For those who stay for a few years, why? I think I can make assumptions as to what the greatest needs and drivers and desires are. But it may be, our teachers may tell us that it's something different, or that there are a collection of 2 or 3 items that rise to the top. So as we do this work, I do ask that we really inquire of our teachers, and even survey those who maybe we're recruiting but decide not to apply or not to come, and to figure out the reason why. It may be housing, it may be the education of their family, it may be taxes, it may be living here. It could be a number of things. So as we find out that information, I think it will allow our efforts to be more pointed and to get the return that we're hoping for and that our teachers and school district need. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Dr. Tracy?
And I must say too, let us not forget that working in an urban environment is very challenging. I've been there, done that, can say it from the hilltop. It's very challenging. This is not an easy job. So for people who are looking the easy way out, it's not New Haven, it's challenging. I've seen in some schools what the teachers are up against, what they have to do in order to just keep order, to get something through to their students. It's not easy. And I think we should not act as if we do not know that happens. And I must go back to the pandemic. As I say to the board the other day, it is the most challenging year that I've ever had working here in New Haven. And I was not even in the classroom. It was the most challenging year. And many teachers will articulate that. It was challenging getting students reacclimated to the school environment after more than a year or so out of it. It's challenging to come back. But I want to lift my hat, if I have one, to those teachers who stayed through it, worked hard, and tried to provide a nurturing environment for our students. Last year was mental health and nurturing, getting our kids to be ready for learning. And I would think many teachers have done that. I just wanted to say that and end with that part.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Bustamante and then Mr. Wilson.
Dr. Tracy brought up a good point. I think a lot of times when we talk about urban education, someone always brings up the behavior issues of students, which the term itself and the connotations behind that can be a little questionable, problematic. But if we want to address that, then we must also pay special attention and put more investment in social emotional learning in schools. And I forgot who said it before, but I totally agree. And it's that improving our school district and recruiting more teachers and retaining those teachers takes a multi-pronged approach. It needs to be an intersectional solution. So that must include investments in social emotional learning and really committing ourselves to that and recognizing that the majority of students in New Haven are students of color and are students who live in poverty. So like what was said before as well, making sure we operate on no fault decision-making. I don't blame teachers who may not want to teach in New Haven because of the working conditions, because of the pay. And I really also commend the teachers who stay, but it takes a multi-pronged approach. So I also recommend that we pay special attention to the social emotional learning committee department. Sorry, I don't know the official name, because that's one thing that's lacking. And I think that's something that teachers can benefit from and students can definitely benefit from. A lot of students come up to us and basically asking like, where are the resources at? Like they're here, but where are they at? How do we access them? There's a great need in New Haven in general. So social emotional learning needs to be a big priority to solve this problem.
Thank you, Mr. Bustamante. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam President. This will be like my last comment on this. Dr. Joyner yells this from the rooftops every time he gets an opportunity. And that is that, you have to have a child in a seat in order to be able to teach them. But even more than that, when you're having these children who are disrupting the learning process, there has to be a way to deal with them. And it shouldn't be the teachers who have to do that. The fact is that we ought to be providing an environment where teachers can teach. And we're not doing that if a teacher has to spend 20, 25 minutes dealing with some problem children, who are the problem children probably every day, the same kids over and over again. And, I wouldn't want to teach in a system where I couldn't teach, where I had to become babysitters and disciplinarians and so on. So we have to find a way to provide environments for these teachers to be able to do their job, what they were trained to do, what they want to do, and that is to teach kids that want to learn. We could, when I was in school, there was always one or two knuckleheads in the class that caused problems, and they were dealt with fairly quickly. Now, I was a student, so I don't know how they were dealt with, but I know they were dealt with. They didn't cause problems every day, every week of the year. They were dealt with. They were moved. They were whatever was done. Their parents came in, gave them a whooping in front of the class. Whatever happened so that these kids straightened up. My brother even got a whooping in front of the class one time when he acted out. So it happens, and I just hope that instead of, talking, and, I bet you those suburban schools have knuckleheads in their classes too.
They do.
So it's not just an urban problem. I think the problem with us is that we don't take care of it. We leave it to the teachers to take care of. And by that time, there are 20 other kids in the class who don't have the benefit of the teacher teaching them. I hope that I am not endorsing suspending kids from school on any of the other stuff, but I am endorsing getting them out of those classrooms so that kids can learn. If that means more in what they call it, in-school suspension. Yeah, that's fine. You know, and that list that we got a few weeks ago, even though it didn't have 6 schools on it, it was missing some of the information, it was still some valuable information there. There were schools that didn't have any in-school suspension, which says to me that they don't have the staff there to be able to do in-school suspension. Otherwise, I would think that they would take advantage of it. They certainly don't have in-school suspension specialists there if they had 0 in-school suspensions. So
Mr. Golden, give me 1 second. Mr. Wilcox, can you take over the meeting for like 30 seconds? My doorbell's ringing. My husband left his keys. Thanks.
So I was at the end of my comments. It's important for us. If we want to retain teachers, it's important for us to provide classrooms where they could teach. Dr. Joyner I'm just reiterating what Dr. Joyner says almost every meeting when this issue of discipline comes up. I hope we, as part of our retention policy, we look at how to do that. Thank you, Madam Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Darnell. Appreciate that.
All right, thank you very much. Hearing and seeing no other comments on this item, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is discussion of possible approval of agreement with SJ Services. It's listed as Dr. Finley. And feel free to bring in others as needed to make your presentation, sir.
Thank you so much. Good evening, board members, families, staff, and community stakeholders. My name is Dr. Finley, Chief of Staff, New Haven Public Schools. Today, I will cover the following areas related to the RFP process for part-time custodians: the posting of the RFP, committee members, process, cost, and implications. The part-time custodial services contract providing service to the New Haven Public Schools District was posted May 24th through the City of New Haven Purchasing Department for RFP. SJ Services is being recommended by a committee initially consisting of myself, Chief of Staff, Thomas Lamb, New Haven Public Schools COO, Dr. Paul White, NHPS Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Michael Gormany, City of New Haven Budget Director and Acting Controller, Mr. Giovanni Zinn, City of New Haven City Engineer. The committee was reduced to myself and Michael Gormany due to scheduling issues for some, and the recusal of Thomas Lamb due to perceived issues regarding his previous working relationship as a purchaser of services from Service Management Group, one of the RFP respondents. There is no requirement for the number of participants needed to make up a committee outside of ensuring that there is more than one person on the committee. The process was guided and directed by the City of New Haven Purchasing Department. Meeting dates and times were posted to Bonfire RFP management system with appropriate notice allowable by the Purchasing Department policy. All documents were posted to Bonfire RFP management system by the City of New Haven Purchasing Department. 5 proposals were submitted and evaluated by the committee. The 5 respondents were asked to present their proposal. After evaluation of proposals and presentations, a best and final offer, as well as additional questions, was asked of all 5 respondents to further level the proposals to ensure that they all were being evaluated equally. After the best and final offer was reviewed, it resulted in the field being reduced to SJ Services and Echo Urban. Though cost was not the only contributing factor, it was a major consideration in the award of this contract due to the significant difference in cost. I want to highlight the other categories that are included in this process, which include responsiveness, references, concepts, previous experiences, qualifications, confidence, and cost. All of these particular categories together make up the process as it relates to rating. This was not based solely on cost. All of these particular areas holistically make up how we rate. Additions to the contract additions include 20 more part-time cleaning positions, to accommodate program moves in the district, to assume cleaning of the adult education program under its new lease, to support the rebalancing of the cleaning workload across the district. This contract is a 1-year contract with a total of 4 options for renewal with price escalations each year. At this point, I'm going to share my screen just so you can see the cost. Can everybody see the? Okay. So on this particular screen, you're going to see the first chart is the year-to-year cost. And again, this is a 1-year contract with 4 options for renewal. But I think it's important as an organization that we forecast and we look not only at 1 year, but we look at multiple years. So I'm just going to go through the difference for the first chart, which is the year-to-year difference. For 2022, 2023, there's a $361,198 difference. 23, 24, $511,318 difference. 2024, 25, $753,194 difference. 26, $998,166 difference. 26, 27, $1,162,150 difference. When you add that up, the overall total of that is $3,776,028.65, which is the 11.96% difference between Echo Urban and SJ Services. If you move down to the bottom, second chart, the cost escalation, it just shows the percentage increase per year. And again, this is a 1-year contract with the option of 4 renewals. But I do think it's important that we try to forecast as much as we can and just see what it could potentially look like down the road. So for the 23-24 school year, for Echo Urban, it would be a 4.46% increase. SJ Services 1.96. Going into 24-25, Echo Urban, a 4.35% increase. SJ Services 1.44. Going into 2026, 2025, 2026, a 4.99% increase. Echo Urban, 1.44% increase for SJ Services. In the last year, 2026, 2027, a 3.8% increase for Echo Urban and a 1.44% increase for SJ Services. I'm gonna stop share there. Implications for not moving forward with this recommendation. Not moving forward with this agreement would add more pressure on an already strained general funds budget by going with a vendor that will cost more money from year to year for part-time custodial service. Every year we struggle to close our gap, a deficit we struggle. This is my first year here, but just doing research and being here for a while. I mean, looking back at previous data, there have been struggles to just try to close the gap with our general funds budget. And just looking at the numbers and looking at the data, I think that this would, as a committee, this would be, the best decision moving forward. So that's my presentation as it relates to just an overview of the process and the numbers. And again, I want to conclude with saying that all of those particular categories mentioned earlier, holistically, brought us to this point here. The separation between the SJ Services and Echo Urban, the cost was a high driver. That was one of the categories, but that was the category where there was the most separation between the two. So I'm gonna end my presentation and open it up for questions. We do have Mr. Tom Lamb here, as well as Michael Gormany here as well to speak to the process and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bolton?
Thank you, Madam President. I have to say, I'm a little concerned with this entire process. The fact that we didn't even start the bid process until May 24th, just a little over a month before the contract was to expire, is concerning to me. It shows a lack of planning, and particularly in such an important contract, and to try to truncate a bid process like this into a shorter window leads to trouble, and that's what it led to. I mean, at the special meeting for the Finance Committee last week, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wilcox, asked the administration to get this information to us as quickly as possible, hopefully before Friday, but of course by Friday when it was going to be posted to the website. Of course, we didn't get it until Friday, even though this information was presented to the Finance Committee, but not in written form last week. So it took them 2 or 3 days to get this information to us, which allowed us, of course, less time to actually review all of the information. And once I got my hands on the information, I reviewed it, and I had a lot of other questions and concerns that arose. And I asked for more information. And guess what? I haven't gotten that information. There is a score. First of all, there was a 5-person committee that was reduced to 2. And those 2 people made the final decision on who to recommend. And that concerns me. That is something absolutely new in a contract this size. I don't care what it says that you only have to have more than one, according to the chief of staff. That still leads to issues and concerns and problems, not having a larger cross section of people reviewing these proposals. I asked for a copy of the scoring sheets that were used, because there is a process in the RFP that outlines how they're scored, and how many points they get and so on. Haven't gotten a copy of the scoring sheets. I don't understand why not. It's public information. Why haven't I and the other board members received that? I like to know what the notes are. I'm real concerned because there are a lot of issues that came up through this process. There was a question about, and this question I'm going to ask directly to Mr. Finley. Was there any due diligence done on this committee regarding the bidders? Were there background checks that were done? We know that the bidder that they're recommending to us was fired from one school facility for not performing, for underperforming, for not hiring enough staff. They actually got fined, and it went on for several years with the school system until they finally said they couldn't take it anymore and fired them. We know that with the NTBA in Massachusetts, they were nearly fired and had to renegotiate their contract, and were sued by unions and so on for what they were doing in that contract. We see in newspaper reports that they were sued by former employees who claimed that they used their Social Security numbers, gave them to other employees to use, and then tried to suggest to them that they should file tax returns in those other employees' names to make up for them using their Social Security numbers. I don't want that kind of a business in the New Haven school system. So I certainly know that if I were on the scoring committee, and I received that information, they certainly would have get a very low score. But I don't know what kind of scores they got, and I don't know what kind of due diligence was done because that hasn't been reported to this committee. The information that I requested hasn't been given to me. And if someone says, well, you know, we just got your request today, well, I just got this information over the weekend. Even though the chairman of the committee asked them to provide this proposal in their presentation earlier, they didn't do it. They ignored the chair of that committee, and they're now ignoring my request for information. And I'm sure other board members probably want to see that information also. So the first question I have, Madam President, is for Mr. Finley. Were they aware of these issues with this contractor? Did they do due diligence, background checks? And if so, how did that affect their decision?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mr. Darnell. And what I will say is we do have Michael Gormley on who can speak to our particular process. As relates to doing due diligence, we receive materials related to each individual vendor before we had them do their presentations and review the documents that we received. I reviewed several references from SJ Services, and I'll make a note of
Madam President, the question is fairly simple, and yes and no answer would do. Were they aware of these issues on performances and firing of this vendor from another school system? Were they aware of that? Yes or no, Mr. Finley?
Yes, sir. And I'm going to answer your question. I do want to finish my statement though. So my statement I want to finish is I did review materials that I received, and the references that I received for SJ Services, all of them, they've been with them for 10 to 15 to 20 years, which means that they do keep a number of their particular vendors. As it relates to the information that you just shared, I did not receive that during the process.
So I mean, it was found on the internet with a simple search for SJ Services. So you're suggesting to me that no one on that committee or in the administration did any kind of due diligence to find out if this contractor or any of these contractors had any kind of issues such as what's been raised to us?
What I'll say is that when I received the particular vendors that we have to rate, Michael Gormley can speak to the process that happens before they are approved to come and compete for the particular bid.
That's Madam President, that is not the question that I'm asking. And I'd like to get a direct answer from either Mr. Finley or Mr. Gormley or whoever else, or Mr. Lamb, whoever's in this process. There were some very serious accusations made against this vendor. You're stating that you weren't aware of that. I think that's what you're stating. You're stating that you weren't aware of those accusations. Is that correct?
I'm stating those particular pieces were not given to me during the process, no.
Okay, so during your grading process, that did not factor into your grading process of these vendors when you were grading, because you didn't have the information. You didn't grade them based on past performance in other contracts. Is that correct?
I graded them on the categories that we had to rate on, which I can go back through those particular categories.
One of those categories includes past performance, isn't that correct?
Previous experiences.
Previous experiences, okay. So that would be considered a previous experience, is that correct? You're fired from another school system. If you're almost fired from MTBA, if you're accused and sued for misusing employees' Social Security numbers, that would have factored into your grading if you had that information. Is that correct?
Possibly, sir. Yes.
Possibly.
Well, Mr. Gormley,
because Mr. Golson, I don't know the particulars of what you're communicating. So I would have to review the
Okay.
Marco?
All right.
I'm gonna ask Mr. Gormany to come
Respond.
on, and because he's on the meeting, so
Okay.
he can respond to some of this and can give
Sure.
maybe a little more light to the actual process.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Gormany? Is he coming up? Oh, there he is.
Good evening. Sorry, I'm in a bad reception area. Yeah, as far as to Mr. Goldson's question, we do have a process that we look at. I did a search myself. I don't know how those when I first did a search, I did not find those articles. I did receive the information today. But we do have a process as we're looking at vendors. And scoring and doing the criteria. Now, when I looked at this vendor, there were articles about contracts and things that they have done that were good as well. When I did the Google search as well. So again, I think I will certainly review the information that was found, but we do look at contractors during the process as they're coming into purchasing.
Mr. Gormany, thank you for that. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Finley, and I got to tell you, it did take me a day to find the information, only because in the memo that was providing to us, they were listed as JS services as opposed to SJ services. And there's a whole bunch of businesses called JS services, but I couldn't find this particular company. And it took me a while until I actually looked at the bidding documents and then realized it was SJS as opposed to JS. And as soon as I did a Google search on JS, I mean, it was 10 minutes before these articles popped up. They were some of the top articles on the search for this company. So it wasn't difficult to find once you knew the real name of the company. I don't know how that JS got confused. And I mean, you know, we all make those kind of mistakes. I get it. But, you know, it took almost a day for me to get past that JS and actually get to the SJ. But Mr. Gormany, I would ask you the same question I asked Mr. Finley. If you had that information in advance about this, about these concerns with this contractor, would that have factored into your grading of this contract? I mean, this contractor.
Oh, we can't hear you.
You may
Mr.
be
Gormany.
muted. You may be muted.
Can you hear me
Still
now?
can't hear you. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm trying to move around to get some better reception, so it's not actually there. I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into consideration when you do that. When we look at the scoring, again, how old were the articles that you found? Again, I just received the information today. How old were the articles? What was the outcome and result? I mean, we've had other vendors that were brought in over the years that may have had a bad experience in one place, but have done great in New Haven. So again, could it have played a factor? Possibly, like Dr. Finley said, I think it depends on a lot of the circumstances. I mean,
Well,
that's just the honest truth. I mean, we've had vendors who have done a poor job somewhere else and have excelled in New Haven. We've had new vendors who have come in that have done a poor job. We've had new vendors that have come in that have excelled. So again.
Thank you, Mr. Finley. You know, I mean, Mr. Gormany, you know, a poor job in one place, you know, I guess you could kind of overlook that. A poor job in several places and accusations and settlement of a lawsuit regarding stealing Social Security numbers, that's a whole nother thing. And we've already gone through that with one of our employees at Adult Ed, stealing identities. I'm sure, and the city could probably tell us better than anybody how much that's eventually going to cost us. I'm sure we don't want to go through that process again, but I think that I would think that any board member and most people would suggest that when those kind of concerns are raised, that they would have some real concerns about that. Though you and Mr. Finley, you and Mr. Finley don't seem to have those concerns. In terms of the makeup of the committee, again, Mr. Finley, have you ever been on a committee before where you selected a cleaning contract this large for a school system? Do you have that experience before?
This is my second one within New Haven.
All right, the first one was
the facilities.
AB. So this is your first year doing this. You don't have this experience before. I'm sure Mr. Gormany has a lot more experience. He's been doing a lot of contracting stuff for many years. I remember seeing him at the finance committee all the time. I'm concerned about the makeup of this committee. Two people, one who had no experience whatsoever, making this kind of decision and this recommendation to the board, I think kind of indicates why we're at this position that we're at now. Talking about a vendor who's been fired from one school system and accused of stealing the Social Security numbers and so on. I think if we had expanded the committee some and included folks like a member of this board, a member from the union, because they've had a lot of problems with unions. They've been sued several times by unions for reducing people's hours so that they can't get health benefits and so on, according to those newspaper articles and lawsuits that have been filed, and according to the MTBA, who actually sued them and forced them to hire up and so on. Who decided on this committee makeup? Who chose the committee? Mr. Gormany, Mr. Finley, or Mr. Lamb? Anybody can answer that?
Mr. Gormany?
Mr. Lamb is logging. He's about to speak, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Mr. Lamb, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the initial committee makeup was chosen by myself in consultation with Dr. Tracy. There was an invitation extended to the chairman of the Finance and Operations Committee, and it was declined.
Mr. Lamb, there are 7 members of this board. If the chairman of the Finance Committee declined, why wasn't other board members asked? And a matter of fact, when I did this process, we asked the board president to appoint a member to any of these kind of committees that we put together like this. Why was there only one board? If one board member declined, why wasn't 6 others asked? Firstly, secondly, why wasn't the union has a big stake in this? They're a huge stakeholder in this. Why weren't the unions asked to participate in this process?
I could speak to the union issue. The union contract is not held with the city of New Haven. It is held with the contracted organization. Yes, they have a stake. However, the contract is not with the city of New Haven. It is with the vendor.
That's not the question I asked you. I asked you, why weren't they invited to the process?
Because the contract is not with the city of New Haven. It is with the vendor.
Okay, if you want to go with that answer, that's fine. Could you tell me why no other board members were asked to participate on this committee?
For that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Dr. Tracy and then Dr. Joyner.
Okay, I do hear the line of questioning. And yes, that was what we went with at first. We did not ask any other board member. After the first board member declined, we did not.
Okay, I assume that Dr. Joyner wants to answer one of my questions. Is that why you're calling on him, Madam President, or do you want me to give the floor for a while?
That's,
Because I have,
no,
because I have
no.
other questions.
No, you can answer, you can ask your questions, and Dr. Joyner can come in.
I could give up the floor for a little while if Dr. Joyner is anxious to ask some questions. I probably have about 8 to 10 more questions. So if someone else wants to participate at this time, I'm fine giving up the floor for a while.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Dr. Joyner?
Self, and what I'd like to do is give some context and make some points. As people who have been watching the board meetings know, I was trying to get a procurement policy written and established for maybe the last 4 or 5 years. And in doing that, I wanted to correct some things that I thought, based on talking to lawyers and people who are experts in these areas, to try to create a policy that would be fair, transparent, and I think we did that. So we wrote a policy where we tried to correct some of the mistakes that we thought were made in the past, and that we wanted to be open and transparent. And any reporter that wants to go back and investigate that'd probably be a great story, because one, and the board passed the policy. One, we wanted the relevant authorities in the city and the school district to be primarily responsible for developing the policy and executing it. And that meant the chief operating officer, the superintendent, and the chief financial officer on the board side, and people like Mr. Gormany and Mike Fumiati on the city side, because that would be the necessary expertise that we would need to have on that. The second thing that we want to do is make sure that the contract would be in the best interest of the district, that the cost benefit ratio would be favorable to the district, because we're battling, as we talked about, under-resourced. We're an under-resourced district, and the more money we can save in labor, non-instructional services, the more money we can reallocate to instructional services. And then we wanted a bid document that would be transparent and that the public could see, that would at least restore some confidence in the public that it was a fair process. All of the vendors had an equal opportunity, and the people that were scoring the bids would be knowledgeable enough to score the bid, and that in drafting the contract, that we would have our legal officers review the contract to make sure that what is promised is being delivered for the amount of money that the contract is for. Now, you can go back and look at previous negotiations, and you can see for yourself who the people were that scored the bids. That's public information. And what we wanted to do, I didn't feel that a board member should be scoring the bid, because we had to vote on it. And, you know, there's an old saying that we should shun the appearance of evil. So I clearly did not want to be accused of favoring a particular contractor. So that was one thing. By having the chief financial officer working with the superintendent and her staff to monitor this process, then there's a level of transparency, because you have minutes, meetings, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't believe that it's appropriate for a board member to be scoring a bid for a contract. That's my personal opinion, and I think that when you have people that are doing the work scoring the bids, then you take away, because we're going to vote on it, so we're going to have a voice in it anyway. And I think it was a good idea that Mr. Wilcox decided not to be a part of the scoring process. I also believe that anybody scoring a bid for a contract with the city and New Haven should be an employee of the city and in New Haven who has expertise in the area specified by the contract. Mr. Finley is while he may not have ever scored a cleaning contract, he has been involved in contracts, and that's critically important. Mr. Gormley certainly has been involved in contracts, and I think that's important also. I think that we should also demonstrate that all vendors had an opportunity to submit their best bid and with the services that they would provide. Now, I happen to know that some vendors will submit a bid lower, but if you look at the fine print, you'll see that they don't have as much staffing because they might have convinced people that they can do the same amount of work for less staff. I've also been involved in big bids with textbook companies, and there are things that people try to do, but bogus companies or companies that are experienced don't do that because it kills their brand and it makes it harder for them to move into other districts. So the questions I would have is, one, was it a process that was open to anyone who wanted to bid on it? Two, did the individuals that bid on the contract get due process? Three, was there a background check done on each vendor? Because when we hire an employee, we need to do a background check to make sure that there are no skeletons or any bad practices in their past. On the other hand, I think that the time of the practice is also a variable. So if you did something 10 years ago that wasn't good, you may not be the same person or company that you are now. And I think that's a factor. I recommended a teacher for certification that when he was a sophomore in college, wrecked somebody's cabin out in the woods in Maine. He was 19 years old, and you're pretty stupid at 19. I don't care how smart you think you are. And I recommended him for a job as a history teacher in New Haven. I wrote a letter to the state. He got the job. He was a phenomenal history teacher, and now he's a medical administrator at the Veterans Hospital. And I think that changed his life. So I think you afford that to companies too. It depends on the nature of the offense, how long ago it happened, and whether or not there have been any recent events that might cause us not to want to hire this person. And then, of course, following the policy. And so when I vote on something like this, I want to have a yes answer to all those questions. And I also want to know that we are finding ways to cut costs, but not compromise quality of services. And whomever we hire, I hope that we have a monitoring system in place that will allow us to know whether or not they're delivering on what they promised in the contract. And I think that should be true of any vendor that we hire. We need to have a monitoring system, early warning system for anybody we hire to make sure that they're living up to their end of the agreement and providing the best quality of services for this. Now, let me say something about Matt Wilcox. Anybody that has watched this board and anybody that knows what Matt looks like, he's ubiquitous. He's everywhere. I have rarely seen anybody, and we all work hard. A lot of people out there don't realize we spend about 30 hours each, minimum, working on school board business. But Matt Wilcox is one of the hardest working and committed people I know. And he has taken over the finance committee. And if there was an award for duty above and beyond for service beyond, above and beyond the call of duty, he would get it. On the other hand, I understand Mr. Golson's passion and commitment to equity and justice. And in many ways, Darnell makes us all better because he's gonna look up as much research as he possibly can about something, and he's going to respectfully bring his concerns to the board. And he's done that. And he's certainly done that in the area of finance and so on and so forth. He can't hang with me in education, but that's my job. That's what I do. So in the interest of no fault, I hope that we can, whatever we do. And by the way, Michael Gormley is also a hardworking, outstanding, and Michael Fuminati is not here, but he and I have worked together a lot, and he helped me with the procurement. And Pat really did a lot. So I'm hoping that we can make the right decision. Whatever decision we make, I'm hoping that we can monitor the vendor that we hire to make sure that our schools are clean. And Dave, I'm hoping that students will not tear up our property. And if anything that you and Mashai can do to help your peers understand that this is their space. They own this space in a lot of ways, and it's their responsibility to keep it beautiful, safe, and so on and so forth. And just going back to something that Donnell said earlier, we should deal appropriately with people who do that, who tear up the school and who bully people. I'm just putting in a commercial for that, because that will be the key to whether or not we're successful or not. If we can get cooperation and respect for all people back into the schools. But I believe that Matt has done a good job managing this process on the board side. And I do agree that you cannot start something like this in May. You cannot do it, because even if you do it right, you open yourself up to criticism because of the time you started. And so it has to start earlier. And maybe the board could be more definitive about when we start a bidding process for any contract of that magnitude. And that's all I have to say about it for tonight. Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was muted. Mr. Wilcox?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner.
All right. Thanks. I have a couple of questions I wanted to clarify. This is a one-year contract with 4 renewals, and the renewals are on it's up to us if we renew. So my question is, and this probably would be for Mr. Lamb, what monitoring will be in place to make sure that the vendor performs as needed, and would there be hesitation to put this back out to bid earlier in the year than May if there are problems and this vendor does not perform?
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. So as part of the RFP submittal, one thing that differs this contract from the previous contract is there is a requirement for a monthly inspection process by the vendor, and also inclusion in a quarterly business review that is part of both ABM and this company's evaluation process that will include members from myself and other members of the administration to review both performance of both organizations together. In addition, we added 1 supervisor from the part-time custodial contract and 1 supervisor from the facility management contract, intended to work together in order to be able to have a more balanced evaluation of the schools in concert with the principals. All of those things together would be reported out during the quarterly business review and evaluated by district staff, so that we are aware of where everything as far as performance lays with both vendors.
So as a follow-up, this review process is different than it has been previous. This is something new.
Yes.
So that sounds like an improvement to me in oversight. And I've certainly seen you and your predecessors very capable having oversight over these contracts. We reviewed it. The current contract with Echo Urban had the unique feature of prepaying for services, and you and your predecessors and Echo Urban have all been reporting all that out, and the data is up on the website and meeting materials for F&O meetings. So I have confidence in that. A question for Mr. Gormany. Roughly how many contracts or dollars go through the purchasing department? And as a follow-up to that, is this an outlier of a contract, or is this kind of standard for the standard process that works over and over again?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Mr. Wilcox. Almost every, so the way procurement works is anything over $10,000, unless it's a state contract or a cooperative purchasing agreement, up to $99,000 needs a bid, RFP or RFQ, some type of procurement process, whether it's the city or the Board of Education. All those contracts go through, all those bids or RFPs go through purchasing. So our normal busy time is usually between February and May, when a lot of departments, including the Board of Education, are getting their contracts and everything on bonfire. So I don't have an exact number, but I can tell you every city department, including purchasing, when you need a bid or RFP or RFQ, goes through purchasing, period, because that's our procurement system, is bonfire. As far as this process goes, I've seen this done in other city departments. Again, I think as mentioned prior, as far as selections of committees, as Mr. Lamb mentioned, that's kind of up to the service being provided and the department providing that service. But we have seen RFPs like this go through purchasing on many occasions throughout the years. I hope that answered your question. If not, let me know.
Yeah, I believe it did. And a question, this one's for Dr. Tracy, because this is something I think is that we're not talking about enough, and it's the thing I keep coming back to, and it was 20% of the score, is $3.77 million over 5 years. And my question is, do we have an extra $3.77 million to put into the cleaning of the classroom, as opposed to into teachers, certified staff, and counselors, librarians, etc.?
So Matt, let me say, thanks for asking. Let me say, we presented to this board a balanced budget and ways in which we're going to mitigate what we did not receive from the elders. Adding anything extra, I'm going to say, would be up to this board to add. You'll be adding more to the deficit that we're already struggling to keep up as we move forward. So that's a hefty amount of money for New Haven when we have teachers asking for more pay, paraprofessionals asking for more pay, a lot more contract negotiation going on for administrators. There's 217, some other unions coming up for contract negotiations. We don't know where that is going to land. So for us being fiscally responsible as a board, honestly, moving forward with a contract that is so much more, for me at least, is problematic. I don't know any of the vendors. I've been locked down to COVID. I heard about people, but I don't know any of the vendors. I'm here going by what is presented to us by way of this process that they have. And they're granted. It started late. Of course, we know that Mr. Lamb just came aboard, getting acclimated to what's happening in the COO position. And so I think they've done their best in going through the process with the city side and using the criteria to make their judgments. And yes, it will be an added cost to the board.
All right. Thank you. I'll just finish up for now, at least. Just want to say that I appreciate all the things that have been sent to me by members of the public. I've read the news articles and things. I've read about the case of a lawsuit being filed in 2012 for one social security number. And I plan on looking in to see what the outcome of that was and the other articles. I also have gone through all the materials that was posted in Bonfire and is as part of our board packet. And I have read the recommendations from other districts and other institutions for the current company. $3.77 million is a real number. And the other final thing that I would like to just say is I do think that we have oversight in place. If this vendor does not perform, we will take care of the district will take care of that. I have faith in the city's purchasing department. I also will just note that it would be the easiest thing if people involved had made a different choice and justified it. This is the more difficult choice, to make a recommendation that does not favor a very highly respected individual as a company owner, person that I respect as well. It would have been easier to make a different choice here. It would be easy to vote for a different choice. But part of being here is taking a look at what the final numbers are. And right now, the final numbers I'm seeing are financial. I'm seeing commitment to hire the part-time custodial folks. It's the same union, SEIU 32BJ, that they're dealing with. So I'm assuming, because if it's a union, that there'll be similar protections for those workers, et cetera. So at this point, I'm not hearing anything leading me to not be voting in favor of this and even making the motion to approve this when it's appropriate to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Dr. Yarborough, and then Mr. Bolton.
Thank you very much. Just have a couple of questions, and I thank everyone for their work on this. And the first starts actually where Mr. Wilcox left off, and I just want a clarification of this. I think this is what I heard in the finance meeting. There is a desire to hire local for a variety of reasons. And my understanding is that currently the staff who are part-time staff who are part of our union, many of them are our New Haven residents. And want to know if someone can officially state and clarify, I wrote in my notes, what happens with the current part-time staff in the current union that the district employs through the current contract?
Mr. Lamb?
Thank you. The current contract will transition to the new vendor, and the union will work with the new vendor to transition whichever staff members would like to move to SJ Services from Echo to the service the district. Additionally, there will be about 20 new positions, and SJ Services will be opening an office in New Haven to help source New Haven residents to be able to provide services for New Haven residents moving into the future.
Okay, thank you very much. I have two more questions. One is, I also received some of the information that Mr. Golson spoke about from one of our vendors about SJ Services. And some of the concerns, it seemed like it was from a full-time contract, like fully servicing a school, whereas right now we're talking about a part-time contract with workers. And so my question is, if we were to restart this process from now in terms of working through bids, is there a reason to think that a restart and a longer process would yield different outcomes? And if yes, what would be the different outcomes in anyone's kind of professional experience?
Are you answering, Mr. Lamb?
Mr. Lamb?
I will
Or-
put in, I will answer that based on my experience. Mr. Gorman, you can answer as well based on his. The RFP that was put out was very specific as to what was required. There's a cleaning schedule that dictates how many times each area is cleaned, how many times we clean and wax the floors, how many times the classrooms are cleaned, which months those services are provided in. There's also a list of all of the properties by square footage and how many cleaners would be placed into those buildings. And initially, those numbers were very widely distributed. The workload balances, we had some staff members cleaning 50,000 square feet and some staff members only cleaning 10. So as part of the rebalancing process, to make sure that those workloads were even, we ended up where we are. As far as would it yield different results, because the RFP was so specific, it would be very difficult for organizations to come back with different results for a third time based on what was submitted in the RFP process. Not that they couldn't, but it's unlikely.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Gorman, is there anything you wanted to add or modify to that question?
No, I think Mr. Lamb put it perfectly. I think what you would really see, because this RFP was pretty straightforward as far as the hours and everything that the Board of Ed was looking for. The only result I can see is maybe a financial outcome result, maybe a little bit of a price here and there, but I don't know if vendors would really submit anything drastically different than.
Okay, thank you very much. And Madam President, just one last question I have. This is for you, Mr. Lamb, directly. My understanding, just looking at what I wrote, my understanding is that you did not score the contracts, that you recused yourself from giving a score because you previously hired one of the applicants for services. And, please correct me if I'm wrong or misstating that. Outside of scoring, what was your participation in the other components of the process, hopefully or presumably bringing your expertise to bear? Like, were you fully recused from it, or just like the actual scoring piece? Just trying to understand.
So I recused myself from the scoring. Yes, you are correct, because I had previously hired a service management group to perform services for an organization that I was employed by. I did not participate in any of the scoring, but was available for general industry questions. I did review all of the proposals. And as far as I'm concerned, I would go with any one of the vendors. For me, it was not a matter of preference, because I don't have one. If it turned out to be one of the other vendors, that would have been fine too. My only goal was to make sure that Dr. Finley and Michael had me as a resource to answer questions around current operations, the RFP as it was written, and if there was any questions around general industry standards.
Thank you very much. And thank you for letting me hear that and letting us hear that, because it helps me to know that the committee, like the final committee, wasn't as stripped down in terms of expertise and insight, and that you did bring something to the table, just not the scoring piece. So thank you very much for clarifying that. Madam President, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Mr. Goldson, would you allow me one clarifying question?
Absolutely.
Before you go?
Absolutely. And I think Ms. Benitez, Dr. Benitez also had her hand up, so I'm
Yeah,
willing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lamb, just one really quick question in terms of your recusing yourself. Was SJ Services the company that you had hired previously?
No,
Which is the
it was
reason for the recusal? Okay.
No, it
I
was
just
not.
wanted to be sure. Okay, thank you. Dr. Benitez, did you want to ask your question?
No, my question was answered already. I was trying to figure out if people were going to be losing their jobs, and as I understand, they're not.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam President. A couple of questions. First, for Mr. Wilcox, I did do a little bit of research on the Social Security issue. There was actually two cases. One, the person died before the case was able to move fully forward. The second case was settled, which indicates that, well, it indicates whatever you wanted to indicate, but it was settled. So there certainly was something there. I'd like to talk about costs for a second, ask questions around costs. The first of all, this is a 1-year contract, not a 5-year contract. And I think to continue to talk about $3.7 million when that just is not true. Certainly, there would be room to negotiate down whatever numbers in the years 2 through 5. And a matter of fact, as the president and founder of ECHO stated today, they did just that. They gave back at least $500,000. They did I don't remember, I didn't write down the notes of all the stuff that he said they did, but he indicated in his presentation that they gave back, renegotiated every one of those years, more money back to the Board of Education. So to suggest that we're locked in to a $3.7 million difference in contracts is just a red herring and incorrect. But I have a question for Mr. Lamb or Mr. Gormany or Mr. Finley, whoever can answer it. I heard this talk of something called true up, and what I heard, and you can confirm this or not, or tell me that it's wrong, that the contractor ECHO submitted a number that was lower than the number that eventually was put on the sheets that we saw. And I was told that was done because of something around staffing, and that the administration had some process or algorithm that they used to unilaterally change the numbers based on how many employees and work hours they wanted. So first of all, I want to make sure I understand, you understand what I'm asking. Did the ECHO Urban submit a number, especially for the first year, that is lower than the number that we have been that we've been given?
So I guess this is Mike Gormany. I guess I'll start off this and then Mr. Lamb can continue. So when we did the RFP, we had a specific set of numbers within the documents that they were filling out. As it was mentioned earlier, we did a best and final offer. When we sent out those documents in order to compare apples to apples, we sent them out with what the district thought they needed, which was 186,000, whatever amount of hours it was on the proposal. Now, ECHO Urban did submit something with lower hours on it. But again, we're comparing apples to apples. No other vendor submitted lower hours. because that's not what we asked for. We asked for 186,000 hours, and that was to compare apples to apples as we're evaluating.
Wait, I have to, Mr. Gormley, I have to stop you for a moment. Several places in the RFP, it is stated that the contractor can submit an RFP with different staffing levels if they chose to do so. Is that correct?
I will defer that to Mr. Lamb, as I believe he mocked up the RFP.
On the first page of the RFP, it says, no, I'm sorry. I'm gonna let Mr. Lamb answer that while I find it, because I saw it in several
Oh, you are correct. You are correct, Mr. Golson. It does say that.
So I am correct. Right. So you're I'm getting some feedback here, so excuse me for a moment. So the Echo Urban submitted a number that was lower than the number that we were giving for the bids. And the administration unilaterally changed that number to a higher number without the approval or of the vendor.
I have to stop you there. No, we did not unilaterally do it. When I seen a lower number, I did contact Echo Urban and ask them if I compare it at 186,000 hours with these factors, would we still get this result? And I have an email that says yes, which is the sheet that you have in front of you.
What result?
So I asked them if I compared at 186,000 hours, 744 hours, with the same hourly rate and everything that they submitted to compare apples to apples and everything else, would the hourly rate and the cost and everything that you see on the sheet be what I outlined to them? And they emailed me back, yes.
Yeah, but
so this was not unilaterally changed.
Wait, Mr.
Gormley, you asked the question, allow him to answer.
He answered it. And
no, he was still speaking.
Thank you, Madam President. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Gormley.
Yes, so this was not unilaterally changed, as I emailed them with what you have on your sheet, comparing the number of hours that you see, along with what they had submitted in their best and final offer proposal. So again, they know the cost that we were looking at.
Madam President, can I continue? Thank you. Thank you. First off, I asked for copies of these emails and I don't have them, so I don't know what they were answering yes to. My assumption is that they were answering yes, if you change the hours, of course, our final numbers will change, clearly. But they also stated, as I've been told, that they could do the job with less hours and with a savings to the school board. And a matter of fact, in the RFP, it says the contractor may propose an alternate staffing plan for the NHPS's consideration. So why would we, why if the current contractor said we could do it for less hours?
Hold on, Mr. Gormley, let Mr. Golson frame his question or whatever is coming out.
Thank you. If the contractor stated that they could do, as the RFP said they could do, propose an alternate staffing plan, and that staffing plan came in lower than the bid that you're now recommending to us, how does that save us money?
So let me be clear. I just looked at the best and final offer. It came in at a total of 5.5 million, which is not lower than S&J Services. So it's not lower still than the vendor that we're looking at the moment.
Wait a minute. But the document you gave us said $5.7 million.
That was using the 186,000 hours. You just asked about the question on their lower proposal. I just looked at their lower proposal and it came in at $5.5 million for the first year.
But Mr. Gormley, if their proposal came in at $5.5 million, that would trigger a New Haven ordinance that allow them to negotiate down to the lower bidders number, as long as it's within 3% of the bids. And that $5.5 million would put them within the 3%, which would allow them to negotiate with the administration by ordinance, by city ordinance. You would have to negotiate with them to allow them to match the lower number of the other bidder. Is that correct?
I will certainly check that out, but I can, but not to my understanding, but I could be wrong.
Oh, you are wrong, and Mr. Wilcox can confirm that. He and I both discussed this over this weekend, and we both looked at the city ordinance. And any contract over $5 million, the local bidder has preference to be able to negotiate down to the lower bidder as long as they're within 3% of the final bids. So that $5.5 million would put them within 3%. Is that correct?
I will double check that.
Okay. Thank you for that. So clearly, the number that they gave to you, which was $5.5 million, was changed to $5.7 million on the administration's part. That's not the number they gave you. That's the number that you decided was going to be their bid. Is that correct?
Again, I went back and forth with them, so I'm not going to say yes to that.
Oh, but you're not saying no.
I'm not going to say yes. That they went back and forth. They knew we were comparing apples to apples at 186,000 hours, and that 5.5 million puts them at about 3.60%.
I don't know if it does or not, because I don't know what their exact bid was, because you haven't provided that information to us, nor have you provided the scoring sheets to us, nor have you provided any other information that I requested. I would respectfully request to this board that there should be some real concerns when the administration admits, one, they didn't review or factor in past performance of the contractor, which is 20%, which is 20 points in the scoring process, just like cost. Two, that they changed the bidder's contract for what they call truing up or apple to apples when their bid says in several places. I just outlined one place for you, but it says several places in this bid that they're able to provide alternate staffing levels, and because they are the experienced contractor, they knew that they could make that work with those staffing hours. So I'm really, really concerned about this process. The board should be really concerned about this process. And I got to tell you, hearing this information, we should be concerned about lawsuits, because this was not a fair. If you look at what we've looked at so far, this wasn't a fair process. It wasn't close to being a fair process. And I had 10 or 15 other questions I wanted to ask, but I don't even know if I need to go through them anymore, because I'm to the point now where just those items, the past performance and the fact that the bid was changed. That is not the bid that they submitted. The $5.7 million was not the bid that they submitted. We don't know. We know that was somewhere around 5.5, according to Mr. Gormley, but we don't even know that for sure. So I would suggest to the board, at the very least, we shouldn't be voting on this tonight. That's at the very least. And if it were up to me, I would start this process all over again. And it doesn't do any harm. And contrary to what Mr. Gormley and Mr. Lamb said, we will get different numbers, because everybody knows what the numbers are now, and they're gonna play with them, and they're gonna work with them, and they're going to figure out what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And I can guarantee you the numbers won't be the same for any of the contract, for any of the bidders. all 5 of those bidders that participated in this process. And it will be good for this school system and for this administration for us to put it out again, because we are going to get the best numbers possible. And we won't have questions anymore about the process. And right now we do. So I am at this point, I'm done with my, you all saw my sheets that I sent you regarding questions. I'm not going to try to get any more answers because I'm already not getting most of what I'm asking for anyhow. But Madam President, I would move at this point that we table this item until we get more information from the administration as to this process.
There's a second. There's no
I seconded, Madam President.
No, you can't second your own motion. Thank you, though, for trying. There's no second, so that motion fails. Mayor Elicker?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the questions from a number of the board members. Mr. Gorman, are you confident that the procurement process that we went through was legal and appropriate?
Yes.
Mr. Finley, do you also feel that the process was legal and appropriate?
Yes, follow the process of the city, Mayor, because that's who controls the process. So the process was outlined and I followed the process of the city. Thank you.
It is August 8th and the school's opening is imminent. I presume that there's some onboarding process with the new custodial contract, and I recommend we move forward with the proposal that is recommended by Dr. Tracy and her team through a procurement process that I trust my staff was done appropriately and thoughtfully.
Was that a motion, Mayor Elicker?
There's not a motion already on the table to approve it, so I'll move to approve the contract as proposed.
For a second.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Any discussion? Mr. Bolton, I see that your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam President. For a staff member to suggest that this was legal and appropriate when that staff member didn't even know the city ordinance around local preference is, I don't know, I guess I should say shocking, but nothing shocks me anymore when it comes to some of the stuff that we do. It certainly is disingenuous. And
point of order. Just the word.
He's right. He's right, Mr. Mayor. You're correct. You're absolutely correct. I take that back. I don't want to use that word. I don't think it, but I don't think that that the answer to that question was 100% correct. Because if you don't know the city ordinances around local contracting, local preferences, then it certainly wasn't a fair process for the local contractor. Secondly, not doing due diligence on the contractor certainly is an oversight that this board, we're fiduciarily responsible for what happens in this district, and to not consider that as something important is concerning to me. I just don't, and thirdly, which is even, now this is shocking to me, to change the contractor's bid number, and it was changed unilaterally. I mean, the contractor said that's not the bid they put in. That's not the bid they put in. So to change the contractor's bid number and move it up $200,000 and put them out of range of being able to use the local preference ordinance that is shocking to me. That's all I have to say. I am always going to fight for the local contractors. I'm always going to fight for the local contractors that hire Black and brown people. This contractor has empowered Black and brown people. I got a call from one of their employees, a Latino woman, two of them today, this weekend actually, who said that, you know, they were working minimum wage jobs until they got with this contractor who Echo, who not only promoted them into leadership positions, but took them out of poverty. And there's no guarantee that this new contractor is going to do that, because they've shown in their past performance that they don't do this. So, you know, obviously I'm going to vote no on this. I'm moving this contract forward, and I'm not going to take up and waste any more of this board's time. I just think it's a huge mistake. I've said that on several different decisions we made, and unfortunately, for this administration, I've been proven right on several of those on those decisions that I suggested where we were making mistakes. I'm thinking we're going to be at the same place again in another year, another 6 months, dealing with these issues. But it is what it is, and thank you, Madam President, for giving me the time to speak here.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Okay, see no further discussion. We'll vote on approving the contract for the agreement with the services.
Dr. Yarborough has his hand up.
Go ahead, Dr. Yarborough. I saw it up, but then it was down.
I know, then
so
I put it down,
thought
yeah. Still trying to figure myself out in these board meetings.
It's okay.
You know, I want to say that for all my participation, and including tonight and on this topic, I do think. I may think differently. I think I may have some different understanding of the material and the presentation and how things have gone through. But, you know, Mr. Golson, I don't want to be construed that if I make a different decision, or if I agree with some of the things that you've raised or any other board member raised, or I agree differently, that I'm not thinking or I'm not seeing. I am open to being wrong, and I'm open to being corrected. But I'm just understanding things in a particular way. So I don't know that it's appropriate for me to comment, but I do take what we're doing very seriously. And I do take the topics that have been outlined very seriously. And this is tough work. And I appreciate everyone's contribution and just walking us through, you know, through this matter. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Excuse me, I can't speak. Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Dr. Benitez and then Mr. Goldson.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, same as Dr. Yarborough, that this is very serious work. And in my part, as being a resident of New Haven for many, many years, and trusting that the city has the right people in the right places to support our processes, I have to trust that this bidding process went through as it should have. And I want to make sure that I make clear that it's not that I don't support local vendors or that I not support Latinos being hired, because you all have criticized me for that. So for wanting to hire more Latinos. So I think that's clear. But, you know, we have processes to keep us legal. And I feel that if we have people who have their duty to do this, we have to trust them, like we trust our superintendent, like we trust people in our district to do their jobs. And if they don't, then we need to deal with whoever is their supervisors need to deal with that, but not at the moment that we're voting on a contract. That is my opinion. And this is something I wanted to share with you all.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Mr. Goldson.
Thank you, Madam President. I never criticized, I'm not sure if you were referring to me or someone else. I never criticized you or anyone else for suggesting that we hire more Latino employees. And a matter of fact, I've been very supportive of that because I think that we're natural allies. I've asked for looking at hiring more Black employees and contractors. So I would never, ever suggest that your opinion on that matter was incorrect, and I was actually supportive of that position. Secondly, I don't want any board member to think that that I'm suggesting that they're not taking this seriously, or that they have some other motives besides what's good for the school system when they make these decisions. Fact is, that's not what I'm saying. I make mistakes. The biggest mistake I probably made on this board was to lead the charge to hire Dr. Burks. And I take full responsibility for making that mistake. And I wish I had listened to the people who knew better, Dr. Joyner, and had not made that decision. I thought it was a good decision for the administration. I really did. I thought she was young, she was bright, she would be energetic, and she would stay with the district for a long time and lead us. And
point of order, Madam Chair. I don't want Mr. Golson to get in trouble. We signed an agreement.
You're right.
This is why my hand is on my forehead.
You're right. Okay.
You owe me, Darnell. I saved you from a lawsuit.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner and Madam President. I make mistakes too. I made mistakes, and I'm just trying to help this board not make mistakes and do what's best for our students and our teachers and our staff. That's why I'm so even though I'm not feeling too well today, that's why I'm so passionate about it today. But I know I'm fighting a losing cause, and just because it is a losing cause, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue to make those points. So please never take my passion as an attack on you. I mean, you have your reasons for making the decisions that you make, and only time will tell whether those decisions are right or wrong. You're going to be on the board longer than I am, because I only have a year left. So you will have to be dealing with it one way or another in the next coming years. Please, if my comments were misconstrued as attacking anyone's motives or motivations or reasons for making these decisions other than what's good for the board, that is not that's not the point that I'm making. That's not the point that I was trying to make. And please accept my I was going to say condolences, but my apologies for if it came off that way. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. All right, so seeing no further discussion, we'll move to vote on the approval of SDA services agreement. And Dr. Joyner, we'll start again with you just to make sure.
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
No.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Ms. Roman. Is she still on?
See her. Is she?
She said her phone died.
I don't see her. Okay. Mr. Cruz Bustamante.
I abstain.
Okay. Mayor Elicker.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, and so that motion passes. And we'll move on to Finance and Operations Committee, Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you very much. If there's anybody that'd like anything moved separately on this list, please let me know. I'm gonna ask Dr. Yarborough to move one item, if he would be so kind to, or if he chooses to. This is the last time I'm recusing myself on things related to Clifford Beers. My lovely spouse resigned her position there a few weeks ago, so she's no longer employed there. But just figured I'd recuse myself one last time. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes, thank you. I move for the board to approve Agreement 3 with Clifford Beers Guidance Clinic to expand the scope of services.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox.
Recused.
Ms. Ramon is not here. Mr. Cruz Bustamante,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. And so that item passes.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yarborough. I'm going to make a motion here, and that is I move that we approve the remaining 21 agreements, 2 contracts, and 2 change orders.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the remaining F&O items. Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz Bustamante,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well, and so those items pass. And so we will move on to teaching and learning. Dr. Joyner?
I've given myself 3 minutes to give my report. We give that much for public comment, so I should have taken 5, but
Hold on one, and did I miss students report? I don't,
yeah, you did.
Student
don't-
report is beneath change orders. It's on the back.
okay, got it. Can you pause for a sec, Dr. Joyner?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Cruz Bustamante.
Good evening, board. Thank you, Madam President. In the packet that y'all got on Friday, there's this document that says plan for conducting citywide student council meetings. Last year, and I think years before that, every month, all the student councils and all of the high schools would meet and discuss different issues that they face in their high schools and basically how we can work together to mitigate that. So Ms. Shai and I worked on this together to make some improvements to the monthly meetings after we talked about last year, and I'll quickly read those off right now. So citywide student council meetings will take place at the end of every month from September to May in the 2022 to 2023 school year. It'll take place from 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Meetings will take place at Hill House High School and transportation will be provided. Pizza and food will be ordered from Marco Polo as soon as the monthly citywide student council meeting starts to ensure that students can eat and leave in time.
I am back. I'm sorry. I'm back though.
Hey, Ms. Shai. Excuse me. Yeah, because that was an issue that we faced last year. Students would leave kind of late because the pizza would get there late. And materials that need to be purchased will be proposed on a case-by-case basis as meetings evolve. For mission and goals, our overall goal is to assemble student leaders, generate ideas, and mobilize together to pursue agreed upon solutions to the problems students face in NHPS. But the exact mission and goals and methodology that we will use will be up to the student leaders that are in those meetings. Ms. Shai and I don't want to dictate what students should be doing, what we should be talking about, what, it's all up to them. And we're also going to break up our meeting into, so the first part will have a grounding where it will be, as usual, Robert's Rules of Order. It'll be the big group and we'll briefly go over updates in the agenda. And the agenda will be built upon by student leaders as we reach out to them as well. And then we'll move into circles where we facilitate discussion. In those circles, we won't operate under Robert's Rules of Order in order to foster more organic dialogue. And then we'll get back, and in the last 30 to 45 minutes, we'll briefly recap and also come up with action items. Communications, students can opt in to join the SSP Slack. That's a student organization that will be dedicated to surveying students and disseminating information from the Board of Education to the student population and vice versa. It is not an official political party, but if students do not want to join the Slack, then we will give them, Ms. Shai and I will give them our personal contact information in case they need any personalized support with their high schools or in case they want us to facilitate something else. So that's that. And I did have another thing to bring up. Are there any questions regarding the plan for conducting citywide student council meetings?
Dr. Yarborough?
Not a question. Want to appreciate thanks for putting forward the plan with the dates and also for both of you for your work to up-level the leadership of the students. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Mr. Wilcox? And then Dr. Joyner?
Yeah, I just have a request is that as the dates get nailed down, if those could be distributed to us, I would appreciate it. I mean, I see looks like it's going to be the end of every month, but whatever the particular dates are. And if there's meetings in particular you want board members at, I just request you put the word out there. And I'm sure folks will get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Dr. Joyner?
First of all, I'd like to thank both you and Ms. Shai for your level of organization. Sometimes I forget how young you are, but I'm sure you're going to remind me at some point because I had these bright moments when I was your age. I'd like to offer an opportunity for the students to meet with the Teaching and Learning Committee at some point during the year, several times if necessary, because I think there's a lot more that students can do, particularly older students. And feel free to take me up on that. I really appreciate what you guys are doing and I want to be helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Cruz Bustamante, does that conclude your report?
Not yet, and then I'll pass
Okay.
it off to Ms. Shai.
Okay.
But this one's more of an official question. So I know that there was a New Haven Security Task Force put together in February of 2021. And it made several recommendations on, well, over here it says, thus we recommend urgently that the New Haven Board of Education consider a strategy through which the district explores all means to increase the number of school psychologists, school social workers, counselors, and other such support personnel as a way of phasing out the SRO program. So I was wondering what the status is on that, because again, and I keep repeating myself, I know, but like I'm relatively new, so I don't know how y'all keep track of all these policies. But what's the status on following through with those recommendations that the report put out?
I believe Mr. Wilcox was going to be working with that with the FNO committee, but I could be mistaken. Mr. Wilcox?
Just two quick things. One is the district has started to work on a new memorandum of understanding with the police department for the SROs. And then the second thing is, I think a good positive step forward would be, and we could do this in a finance and operations meeting, is just getting a baseline as to how many of these staff members there are that are considered that support staff, guidance counselors, social emotional folks, et cetera, and the distribution in the schools. I've taken a look at this in the budget book, which outlines when a school has a position on their budget for it, but I think it probably would be good just to get a sense of how many guidance counselors there are and where are they, just so that if nothing else, we can establish the baseline from which to then see what the desired or proper or best number would be, and then be able to do a basic gap analysis to see where we need to move and try to identify funds.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
That is all for me. I could pass it off to Student Representative. Yes.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well, and I'm excited for the school year. I just want to let y'all know that. I have a few things I want to talk about. The first thing I have is, what are the COVID protocols for this school year as far as masks? And then are we like gonna have lockers back? So that's my first question.
Okay, so thanks, Mashai. Dr. White is here to answer that, but I could also take a crack at that. As you know, we went back to having option for mask wearing, so that's still in place in terms of options. Dr. White is working with the New Haven Health Department, and we'll be sending out some information shortly to parents and to staff.
But one of the key things that we want to get out to all students, families, and staff is that all New Haven buildings remain mask friendly, which means we are asking individuals and families to make their personal decision. It's going to be a safe space for people who feel more comfortable wearing masks, whether it be their personal decision or whatever their household choices are, or if you feel comfortable to be mask free, you can do that. But the intent, of course, around masking, as long as health numbers dictate, and this will always be an ongoing conversation with the health department, is that it is mask optional, but mask friendly at the same time. So we want families, students to feel comfortable, and staff to wear a mask if they feel their particular circumstances want it or their personal feelings.
And in terms of, remember that testing is still available. What we have also, vaccination of students is still available. We work with the city's health department and that. We also have, we'll be getting kits, more testing kits to be distributed.
Yes, and two other pieces of information just to get out, and all this will come out again in formal formats, but this week there is vaccination clinics at Roberto Clemente, Wexler Grant, and the Field House tomorrow. Then later in the week, it will be in the Fairhaven neighborhood at Fame, as well as Clinton Avenue, and we'll be moving around the state. The dates are and locations are on the New Haven Public Schools website, and it is from 3 to 8, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays this week, and then it'll be offered again in 2 weeks as options for that.
They sent robocalls for that, Dr. White?
Yes.
For the clinics?
Yes.
So one thing is being careful, because the virus is still rampant, and so we ought to be still careful and take all the precautions we can to protect ourselves.
And specific to the locker question, yes, lockers will be available for use.
Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is, I know that you guys send out like emails about the different activities that New Haven Public Schools offer, and then like the vaccinations and all those things. My thing is, parents only receive those, and I was wondering if we could make sure that it's out to students too, because students don't receive it. Just like be sent to like our school emails, because I know you send it to our parents, and sometimes our parents don't check the school emails, and I feel like students miss a lot of opportunities. I'll be checking my mom email to look at those opportunities, but I know other students don't, and I don't want them to miss out on things. So that's just like something I want to address.
That's actually a good idea with someone.
We could work on a process for how to go. I can't say right off the top, it's easy to get it to the student accounts, but something that I believe can be done. We just need to check into the IT team how best to go about that.
Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about is, I know that New Haven Public Schools does have mental health resources. You know that I'm big on mental health. How will you guys be getting like how will students know about the mental health resources that New Haven Public Schools do have? Because I know that there are some in the schools, but I feel like students aren't aware of those things. So like, how would you guys be like promoting it and allowing students to know, or do you leave that in charge of like the school to do those type of things?
So primarily, I'm shy, we leave that to the school. Things are funneled down to the principals, to the counselors in the building, and that's supposed to be given to the student at the school level. Because I don't think we have the students,
Certain things can be posted out to the students, but this would be something else we would work on as part of it. But at any time, and this speaking to you as well as to any student or parent listening, you can always ask your school about what resources they connect with, whether it be the Alive clinicians, Clifford Bears, or all those. You can check with those things, particularly in your main office with your principal, assistant principal, or any school counselor on your bill would be able to have that information. But I believe you are asking for some way that this could be in some simple place so that you as a Hill House student know these are the things available, or Mr. Cruz Bustamante as a course will know this is what's available at course. And you both of you as leaders want someone to know what's happening at all the high schools. Is that a correct summary?
Yeah.
and so we'll do a better job, Ms. Shai, of making sure that it's funneled down to students as much as possible. Okay? Because we do
Okay,
have.
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. And thank you, Ms. Gaman. Okay, so now we can move on to teaching and learning. Dr. Jordan.
Yes, and I'm going to ask Mr. White to time me. Mr. White, give me 4 minutes. This is not public comment. This is a report. I'd like to start out my report with a quote from Ron Edmonds. And those of you who know him know the tremendous contributions he made to education. Those who don't know him should Google him and know who he is. He said, "We can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to do this. Whether we do it or not must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we have not done it so far." Now, when he made that statement, it was in the mid-1970s, and life was very different then. You didn't have the kind of activity in the schools. You didn't have the kind of defiance on the part of students, and you had stronger families. We are in the process now of trying to evolve into a school system that can educate the bottom 2 quartiles of achievement. If you look at Smarter Balance, they have a pretty good rubric for identifying students on the basis of whether or not they're ready for success in college and beyond. And you look at the first rubric, not met, which means that there are kids who, on any measure, that have not met the prerequisites to move forward in education. And we have a lot of those kids that start out in kindergarten in that category. We need to know how many they are, because you need a different school system to educate kids that live in hard places, because they need a lot more support. It's the equivalent of the emergency room in the hospital. And those kids that have exceeded levels of learning, they still need education, because sometimes people are smart and they have poor character. And we know what happens to smart people with poor character. And so that's that holistic notion that Abby talks about in terms of the whole child. And part of it is mentioned when Dave talks about social and emotional learning. That's a very complex phenomenon. So you can read the minutes of the teaching and learning. And if you have any questions you want to get to me, feel free to do so, and I'll be glad to answer them off-site. But going forward, I've talked to Dr. Tracy about how we present data, and the idea that we're working to try to present data in the most user-friendly format as possible, so that all the stakeholders that are on the other side of that presentation understand what we mean by that. And I think one of the major things we can do is to, at every grade level, identify those kids who have not met certain standards that will allow them to proceed well in the next grade, those kids that are approaching that, and those kids that have exceeded that. And I forgot the second category. But the bottom line is we have to move kids from having not met prerequisites for learning. And in kindergarten, we have about 13 years to do that with that cohort of kids. And so what I'm preparing now and working with Dr. Tracy and others on is a way to present that data that will graphically indicate the lowest levels of achievement in the district. And that's also coupled with attendance and attention. Donnell made a great point that we can't educate them if they're not present, and we cannot educate them if they are disruptive. No one can do that. If you go to a football game and you act up, they put you out. If you go to church and act up, they put you out. And they can tell you not to come back ever again. And so we're going to have to, that's a major issue. Am I done with my time?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to stop. So if you got anything else you want to ask me, call me and I will be setting up meetings. I'll be setting up meetings with the students, and I'm willing to meet with anybody that's interested, sincerely interested in educating all the kids in the school district.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Golden, oh, he disappeared.
Thank you, Madam President. I was actually going to suggest to Dr. Benitez that she was kind of throwing me off kilter a little because her screen was on, but she fixed it now.
If I look at the minutes, if I look at documents, that happens apparently.
Okay. Is there any questions for Dr. Joyner? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Superintendent's report, Dr. Tracy.
Again, hello, everybody again. I am burdened with, let me start this way, and as I look at the upcoming school year and wishing and hoping that my students will at least have a teacher in front of them. We are tirelessly working to get staffing in place, and I'm sure everyone understands the challenges we have. We will have staff at Yale Wolseley Hall on the 24th of August. Our board president will be saying a few words to ramp up the group. We will also allow streaming for those who prefer to see the event streamed. We're doing this as a matter of inspiration and motivational piece for staff. There will be students performing. There'll be staff performing. We have a large staff choir that was put together and it's being supported by Dr. Jonathan Barman and others. So there's a huge, and if board members want to sing along with them, just let them know. They'll be willing to have you join in. You have a voice to sing. And so that will be there. We're trying to set the stage for the school year and set it away from the negative vibes and let our teachers hold on to some hope. And not only our teachers, but the whole entire district, because it's open not just to teachers, but to all our staff. We also have a back to school kindergarten campus that will be run by YFCE, and back to school distribution of school materials as we have done to support our families. These are some of the things I know right now. The next thing I want to say is that, as some of you may be aware, we've been exploring locations for adult education. And in terms of, we know that adult education has a very dilapidated building now in which they are working. We know that Tony Walker, Honorable Tony Walker, had procured through the state $20 million to fix up a building somewhere. So we've been looking at different locations, and that very, very, very soon we'll be presenting locations to the board. We know that you have a part to play in it, as well as the mayor's side have a part to play in it. So members of my team and members of the mayor's team have been looking at locations, and we bring that information to you very shortly. And it's not for discussion, it's just sharing. That's where we are right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Madam President. I was going to ask the question of adult ed, whether it's going to be a report on it. Clearly, there's a report coming eventually. I just want to state that I think that if we're going to put money into a building for adult ed, I think we should take one of our current empty buildings, like our Orchard Street Strong Schools site, and put that money into that facility, so that again, it's our facility, and it is built to do school educational type stuff, and that's what we should do. So I'm hoping the recommendation comes back for Strong School, but I'm just putting that out there. Second thing is, could Dr. Tracy give us a quick update? We all got a bunch of emails this weekend about this AP class at Cross. Could she give us a quick update on that? I think there was a resolution to that. But more than that, I'd like to hear if we're having problems with classes like that in other schools because of a lack of teachers to teach them. Are we canceling classes in other schools? Are we looking? Is that something that we've done before because of lack of teachers? I've never heard that before, so I'm curious just kind of hear an update on that. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, so let me start with the last part. Of course we do that. We cancel our collapsed class. We cannot teach. If you don't have enough students in the class, you can collapse the class. If you don't have the teachers for those classes, rather than having a substitute, you can also not offer the class. And as I mentioned in the email back and forth, that scheduling and course, the scheduling is germane to every school. It's unique to every school. There's some schools that offer more courses than some schools. Case in point, ESUB offers more with their theme of engineering. And you'll have students towards the end of the year getting out of there to be graduated quickly so they don't have to do the one, and Abby knows that, they don't have to do the one credited engineering. So we do have schools offer different things, and pretty much the central office does not determine the school schedule. That's determined by the principal and their team, what happened. What my understanding of what just happened across that, they were looking at how they can best offer more of the upperclassmen AP classes because they're on their way out, and then hold off a little bit. But we've had conversation with the principal and the problem is solved, the issue is solved.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Dr. Benitez?
Yes, I just on that subject, and thank you, Dr. Tracy, for and the principal and the staff at Cross for addressing that. I want us to remain very conscious that it took us a while to get where we are in some of our schools because of staffing, because of philosophy and all that. And I want us to continue to support teachers and students in being part of the AP coursework. It is something that is difficult for students, for some students, and it is difficult for some of our teachers at times because students need more support. But we all know that as many of the parents share with us, but we all know as educators that is a gateway for success in advanced careers. So I want us to make sure that our Latino, Black, and any student who want to take an AP course is afforded that, regardless of they are prepared or not. We have to be prepared to support them. That is my personal and professional opinion. And thank you everyone for doing that today. That was very remarkable.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Dr. Tracy, does that conclude your superintendent's report?
That concludes my report for today. A lot on the table, but we've been here for a while.
Thank you, thank you, Dr. Tracy. All right, for superintendent's report, just be looking out from a text from me. I'm gonna try and see if we can schedule hopefully the final executive session for the evaluation of Dr. Tracy. I'm hoping for early next week. So I'll be texting you all within the next day or so. Okay, then we'll move on. If there are no questions, we'll move on to Head Start report. Mr. Wilcox and Dr. Wilcox.
Thank you. This will be brief. There is no report because our meeting is coming up on August 18th, although I will add that I know that there are still slots available. If any members of the press are still on the call here, if you wanted to do a great story about how wonderful Head Start is and how many spaces there are in New Haven, that would be great because I know staff is working really hard at getting kids in those slots.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Citywide School Building Committee report.
No report because this one it was scheduled for August 11th, but I think it's going to be moved because there are several people that are going to be unavailable on that date. So that'll probably get moved into next week sometime.
And finance and operations.
The one thing I'll mention about finance and operations is just to let everybody know we're going to end up having to have a special meeting. There are a number of special ed related contracts and agreements that we need to get through and probably several others. So there will be a special meeting. At this point, it looks like we're just going to do it. We didn't have a meeting scheduled for next Monday. We only had one scheduled for this month, which I guess was wishful thinking on our part. And so we will most likely be meeting at 4:30 in our regular time slot on Monday, August 15th. And then we'll be putting in a request for a special meeting. Maybe we can connect it to going with the executive session in terms of several action items that need to get done before the end of this month for the school year.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Dr. Joyner, your hand was up, but
I took it down. Took it
okay.
down.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Governance report, Dr. Benitez.
Yes, we will have a meeting on 8:15 this month. And I just want to let you all know that we will be reviewing series 5,000 and 6,000 in that meeting, some of those. And I'm also trying to make sure that to encourage people that if you want a policy to be written around a specific situation, which you keep saying things in meetings, but I'm not sure sometimes what's the wording that you're thinking and that kind of thing. I would really rather you send me a message with a concrete suggestion by the Friday before the meeting. So this week, if you have something that you would want us to at least consider, please send it to me so that I can see what you mean by we should have a policy for this or we should have a policy for that. It will be easier for me. Maybe in a year or so, I'll be able to run with your suggestions, but right now I'm still learning. So, but if you want to attend the meeting on 8:15 to see how we will review some of those, you are, as you all are, always welcome. But know that that will be most of the work we will be doing, reviewing policies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Benitez. And seeing no raised hands, we'll move on to Food Service Task Group. Dr. Yarborough.
Thank you. The Food Service Task Force will meet this Wednesday. In addition to other matters that we'll discuss, we will also discuss the upcoming August break or gap between when summer programs end and when the school begins. And I know the district, as well as our community partners and leaders, are working to partner with families and serve families during that food gap period. And so we will meet this coming Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Dr.
So
Joyner?
moved. Yeah, I have a question of Dr. Yarborough. during the
Not nice.
during the past few years, we've served breakfast, lunch, and dinner to students. Do we have any data on the number and amount of meals that we've served during the pandemic? Is that data available?
I would think it might be. I will ask.
Yes, and
Gail Shirley.
yes, and could we get a report at the next meeting? Because I think as we move toward a more effective system, I think we need to help the public understand that our mission has broadened significantly since the one-room schoolhouse, and some of those things that we do are taken for granted, and I think it's important for people to know that. And I'll stop at that. And I'll second your motion, Darnell, to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you for the request.
So, Madam President, I move we adjourn.
I second.
Thank you. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Mr. Bolton,
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes, Lord.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
students are gone. Mayor Elicker.
Yes.
He can sing, guys. Get him in the choir.
I'm a yes as well. Thank you all. Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.